Salt spray lashed the iron prow of the sea dragon as it heaved through churning water the color of melted pewter. Yara Greyjoy stood braced on the forecastle, one boot hooked beneath a tar-black cable, her pale hair whipping about her face like torn banners. The war-horn boom of breakers against cliff and hull mingled with the steady thrum of 1,000 oars striking the sea in relentless rhythm. Every beat was a promise, a vow whispered from the drowned god to his daughter, that the mainland would soon hear the song of the Iron Islands, pay the iron price or drown. In the narrows to her east, all 12 great Kraken-proud flagships of her new fleet surged abreast, torch lanterns glowing amber through sheets of rain. Beyond them, lost in the fog, waited another 200 longships, sleek, shallow-draft reavers refitted with scorpions and trebuchet beds strong enough to hurl barrels of burning pitch. They had been forged from the bones of Euron's scattered armada after his final bloody gamble at Fair Isle. Pieces of his grandiosity were nailed together here. Sails dyed in faded dusk purple, steel-rimmed wheels pried from shattered decks, figureheads carved anew from his broken masts. What remained of the Crow's Eye himself rotted in a crab cage off Pike's western quay. Yara inhaled the sting of brine and tar with a wolfish satisfaction. Winter had come south on white wings, and the high lords of Westeros, huddled in stone keeps whose stores had not been built for a siege that marched on both land and sea. When Queen Cersei's envoys knelt before Yara in the ashes of King's Landing's charred fleet and begged an alliance against the undead, Yara had granted safe passage north, but not friendship. On the return southward, those same envoys found themselves clapped in irons, their ships seized, and every surviving sailor given the choice to swear salt and iron or take the long step. Now, for the first time in 3,000 years, an iron-born high captain bore a crown other than driftwood. Atop Yara's brow glimmered a circlet hammered from the blades of the 7 septons she had taken at Saltpans, each iron petal ending in a barbed kraken's tentacle. The crown's weight chafed less than the thought of her father's tree-rotted dreams. Harrying coasts, stealing daughters, then scuttling home to Pike like gulls with half-digested fish. She wanted more. Isles were cages, seas were corridors. The mainland, with its orchards and forges and garrisons, was a board waiting to be turned. She descended the steps to the quarterdeck where Aaron Damfair, Bonuthin, and soaked but still muttering scripture, leaned over the rail. "The storm eases," he rasped. "The drowned god clears the path to Old Town." "Ay," Yara said. "Have the signal flags run, oars in for silence. We'll drift on the ebb tide till we sight the beacon at the high tower. No roof in the city should know we're here till our hooks bite their docks." Aaron's mouth worked round a prayer, and he disappeared into the dark. Yara drew a leather map case from her belt, unrolled the oilskin upon the capstan, and studied inked coastlines lit by a guttering lantern. Her plan radiated from the Shield Islands like a claw, blockading the Mander, cutting grain flow upriver, then choking the Arbor to stop any Reachman fleet from mustering. Once Old Town's harbor fell, the Citadel's ravenry would be hers. No messages to Highgarden, no cries to Dragonstone, no pleas to the new Northern Council still scrabbling to rebuild Winterfell's burnt granaries. The whisper of boots behind her announced Theon. He moved with a furtive limp, part memory of torture, part reminder of a soul stapled back together by his sister's uncompromising love. In the weak lantern light he looked almost whole again, his bearded jaw set firm, the hesitant boy of Pike replaced by a man tempered in flame. Rounding the whispering sound in an hour, he said quietly, "Our outriders report only fishing cogs. The red wine fleet never returned from Dragonstone." Yara nodded. "They'll return when the Arbor sees our sails. But they'll find their slips piled with burning wine casks and no tide to carry them clear." "Menderu?" She rolled up the map, tied it with a twine knot. "You know your task," she said. "Silence the Citadel's ravenry. Maesters love chains. Let them feel them." Theon's grin was a pale echo of the wolfish one he once wore as Prince of Winterfell, yet determination glimmered beneath. "Chains," he repeated, and vanished into the companionway. By dawn the fleet lay hidden beneath fog banks between the bones of 2 merchant hulks, intentionally scuttled to widen the mouth of the Honeywine for their passage. Sails furled, oars muffled in felt, The iron tide slipped upriver past Salt Marsh and Sleepy Orchard. Old Town's towers rose ahead, pearl-white ghosts in the mist. The high tower's beacon extinguished for night economy. The sept of the starry spanning heaven like cracked marble eggshell, and beyond, silent and looming, the citadel's stepped libraries. At a hand signal, a dozen prow-rams flexed. The first shriek of splintering oak shattered gull calls as ironclads smashed the quays. Hooked planks dropped. Salt-clad reavers poured across them with axes gleaming. The sleepy watch on Old Town's wall had time for one alarm bell before the first pitch barrel erupted, showering the guardhouse in liquid orange flame. Yara leapt from her prow to the stone pier, boots striking puddling blood and lamp oil. A crossbow bolt nicked her pauldron. She replied with a throwing axe that buried in the archer's throat. Behind, the iron-born war song lifted, deep, wordless, older than Andal rule. Every verse promised glory only to those who took it. She sprinted toward the chain gate, where 3 links of citadel black iron blocked the river's secondary channel. 2 maesters in soot-streaked robes tugged futilely at the counterweights. Yara's shieldman drove one into the water. The other tried to flee for the Ravenry Tower, but was pulled down by 2 drowned men who slit his throat with coral-edged dirks. "Lower the chain," Yara ordered. When hesitation flared in her crew, she yanked the lever herself. The massive links clanged down, opening the way for the second wave of ships to nose upriver toward the grain barges berthed within. Burning rooftops painted the dawn crimson. Screams of panicked townsfolk mingled with the clatter of half-trained city guard, rallying at market squares. Yara ignored them. Raiders would corral civilians toward the quays, where they'd be locked behind makeshift palisades for ransom or trade. Turning her helm's visor upward, she eyed the silver rookery swirling on the Ravenry Tower's balconies. Ravens blossomed like black petals against the smoke-choked sky. Some carried messages already penned. Most wheeled uncertainly, balked by the scent of fire and salt. She heard 3 thuds, grapnels biting stone. Theon's boarding party repelled upward. Arrows streaked down, but iron-born shields made roofs of themselves above climbing shoulders. A heartbeat later, an explosion within scattered ravens in a shrieking cloud. Feathers drifted in fiery dawn like charred snow. No word would reach Highgarden today. By mid-morning, Old Town's docks were a charnel ground of collapsed warehouses and hacked corpses. Wine casks shattered, pouring dusky rivers that gleamed with floating fruit and brains. But the harbor mouth stood barricaded by a wall of commandeered merchantmen, chained side to side. No relief could sail without burning those hulks under fire from iron-born scorpions already nested among the ruins of the port market. Yara stalked the quay, inspecting the line, counting scorpion nests every dozen yards. She pictured Tyrell banners on the horizon, and smiled. "We hold fast." She told her captains around a barrel table strewn with half-dry rum and blood. "Send Swiftkeels to Maidenpool and Duskendale. Take their fisheries. The narrow sea routes will starve without salted cod. Let Storm's End shout for food and hear only echoes." Aeron Damfair raised dripping arms. "The drowned god favors the bold. We have taken the greatest harbor in the south. The Reach will kneel and their daughters will fill our longhouses." Yara slammed a dagger point into the barrel. "Not daughters. Shipwrights, blacksmiths, masons. We are done stealing women for coin and bedding. We take craftsmen, we build." Some captains bristled, memories of old ironborn ways itching like barnacles. But the promise of permanent mainland pavilions, of brick grain towers flying the kraken, tempered their revolt. And Yara's dagger remained fixed like a compass needle pointing north to greater prey. On the high road to Bitterbridge, a Tyrell outrider galloped towards Highgarden's perfumed gates, face black with soot, eyes wild as his lathering mare. "Old Town burns," he shouted before collapsing across his saddle. Lord Garth Tyrell, rye-blonde hair to the withered house Tyrell, read the message pried from the corpse's fist and felt his bowels chill. Without Old Town, the Reach's grain tithe filled only their own bellies. The northern realms, still reeling from the long night's scythe, would receive no shipments. Winterfell, White Harbor, Even Lannisport relied on Reachman bread. Famine would bloom like mold beneath spring thaw, and every hungry lord would point his blame at Highgarden. Garth's council clamored for a charge of knights arrayed in shining columns, banners aflame with golden roses. But banners did not float, and the Ironborn commanded the Mander Mouth. Every ferry crossing could be raked by shipfire. A siege by land meant marching through marsh and orchard, with supply wagons vulnerable to coastal raids. The Reach was rich, yes, but its riches were as ripened fruit waiting to be plucked by any arm long enough. Garth sent pleas to King's Landing, where Queen Asha Arryn now ruled in name, only over rubble and ash after Cersei's demise during the Long Night. But the capital's coffers were gutted, its people gaunt. Dragons were gone, their last broken eggs interred beneath the fallen Red Keep. Ravens flew to Stark Winterfell, to Tully River Run, to Martell's Sunspear. Each returned bearing condolences and regrets. No house could spare seed or spears. All fed their own widows first. Yara read those replies in her cabin aboard Sea Dragon days later, the stolen maester's seals still hanging like trophies from her rafters. She tapped one parchment with a gauntleted finger. The Reach begs. She mused to Theon, stretched across a bench sharpening axes. And the North scatters nice words like breadcrumbs, while hoarding grain in their snow-buried cellars. The Starks will not deal willingly, Theon said, lips tight. I know them. Yara shrugged. Then we'll give them a choice dressed in iron. The next phase unfolded, with tidal inevitability. Swift keels harried the coasts from Cape Wrath to Dragonstone, torching every fishing village too slow to yield. By summer's height, salted cod and herring were rarer on market stalls than ambergris. Small folk flocked inland, swelling holdfasts until they burst with hunger and sickness. Rumor of cannibal cookpots in Blackwater hamlets reached the small council's ears, but no one dared confirm. Meanwhile, Yara fortified Old Town's harbor with scuttled stone stairs and driven iron pilings. She dredged the Honeywine and erected booms anchored by burned ships' skeletons. Floating ramparts bristling with captured ballistae. Supply barges from the Shield Islands arrived daily laden with timber and smoked meat seized from Fair Isle storehouses. Local masons, coaxed with pay and threatened with flames, raised stout granaries along the quays. Within a moon turn, enough Reach grain to feed 50,000 reavers for 2 winters lay under guard of black-fletched arrows. She stood upon the Hightower's roof one dusk, surveying her new domain through salta fog. The Hightower's beacon blazed behind her, a black tanned gold kraken banner draped in place of the lantern shutters, so every fishing cog that ventured near saw who held the mouth of the world. The sky glowed indigo, clouds torn open to reveal the evening star. Yara's lungs filled with smoke-tinged dusk, and she felt a fierce, centered certainty. The Iron Islands had always been an anvil beaten by storms. Now they were the hammer. Behind her, Maester Cerwyn, the reluctant, chain-collared head of Old Town's sequestered learning, approached, flanked by guards. Lady Greyjoy, he began, voice quavering. You ask for knowledge of river soundings to sail the Mander to Bitterbridge. The charts you seek are incomplete. They will suffice, Yara said, not taking her gaze from the horizon. And you will copy them thrice. One set sails north with me, one stays here, and one travels east to the Arbor under guard. Cerwyn swallowed. The Arbor's defenders remain numerous. Lord Paxter commands those wine ships yet. Yara turned, smile sharp. Command, yes. But he cannot feed sailors on grapes. When the Arbor starves, his men will trade flasks for loaves and turn cannons on their own gate for a sack of barley. Mender. She dismissed the maester and leaned on the stone parapet, letting her thoughts unfurl with the rising evening breeze. Conquering Westeros with steel alone was folly. The realm was a hydra. But choke its belly, its rivers, its docks, its nets, and each head fought the others for scraps until none remained strong enough to keep the body upright. Already lords muttered about grain levies, about treacherous harbor masters, about neighbors' barns rich with miscounted harvests. Divided by hunger, they would be ripe. And when they finally sued for peace, they would find the peace terms written in salt water. Autumn's first storm rolled over the arbor like a shroud, lightning flash revealing a forest of masts crowding Greenport's once proud quays. Wine ships bobbed at anchor, their holds empty, their crews gaunt. On the horizon, a line of black sails dipped and rose with the swell. Scouts of Yara's main fleet, nose-testing shoals. Cannon emplacements on Stone Crab Cay spat warning shots, but their powder was damp, ball shots landing wide. Lord Paxter Redwine hurried along the seawall, cloak flapping like torn parchment. "Where is our grain convoy?" he snapped at his steward. "Where are the Maidenpool cogs? The Gulltown colliers?" "Driven back, my lord, or taken," the steward whispered. "The Ironborn, close every strait." A roar sounded down harbor. A tower of flame where a coastal galley exploded, caught broadside by 2 pitch barrels flung from catapult rigs, lashed to longships' sterns. Panicked sailors dove into wine and dark water cluttered with splinters. Ironborn skiffs darted among them, hauling half-drowned men aboard, only to bind their wrists for ransom. Paxter gripped the cold stone until his knuckles bled. Somewhere inland, golden vineyards shriveled beneath autumn frost that came early this year. The arbor's claim to luxury rotted on the vine while this iron tide swallowed the realm. He wondered, fleetingly, whether kneeling could save his people. But the thought curdled. His house had drunk with Targaryen kings, furnished ships to Baratheon lords, dined with Tyrells under golden trellises. Kneeling to an up-jumped kraken? Better to drown with his wine casks than toast a salty queen. That night, 13 Ironborn longships breached the Greenport dike at low tide, sacks of charred pitch bursting among dock pilings. By dawn, half the arbor fleet was ash and smoke. Lord Paxter fled to Vinehead Keep with a bare handful of knights, his sons gone to silent prayer in the sept. 2 days later the keep's waterways ran dry, their aquifers diverted by Ironborn sappers. Thirst broke pride faster than fear. Paxter opened his gates. His sons handed Yara the keep's wrought iron keys in exchange for bread and water. Yara accepted the surrender beneath the vinning-covered arch of the main gate. "You'll keep your lands," he told Paxter. "But arbor wine flows first to Old Town, then north. I'll take 1/10 of each cask." "A 10th?" Paxter croaked through cracked lips. "That's ruin." Yara's laughter rolled like surf. "A 10th, or I grind your vines to dust and plant barley. Choose." Paxter chose, head bowed, lips trembling. 6 moons later, the realm lay clasped in a grip colder than any winter wind. Blockade. Old Town, the Arbor, Cape Wrath, Crackclaw Point. All ports flew the Kraken. Gulltown's merchants paid tolls in silver chest after silver chest, merely to slip past an Ironborn patrol and reach Braavosi markets. Even White Harbor's once a proud Manderleys hung gray banners at half-staff, their convoy rights purchased by hosting a permanent Ironborn squadron at harbor mouth. Yet Yara did not rest on seawalls and shipping tithes. She set her eyes upriver along the Trident Forks, where barges still ferried wheat from Riverland's mill towns. She dispatched 6 longships, painted green and brown to blend in reed channels, each captained by Northmen sell sails, sworn to no lord but coin. Under disguised banners, they glided past River Run's dark towers, seized grain wagons awaiting transshipment, and burned them in view of Lord Blackfish's outriders. When Edmure Tully protested this outrage to the Ironborn ambassador in Old Town, he learned that none of the longships belonged to Yara's fleet. "Pirates," she claimed, "or perhaps freebooters in Tyrell employ." Theon stood by her side when the letter arrived. He read Edmure's polite threats and snorted. "They suspect you, but they cannot prove it. Proof is a luxury of the Fed," Yara replied. "By the time they bother finding it, they'll be gnawing their own shields." She turned the parchment over, dipped quill, and drafted her reply. "A gracious offer to escort Tully grain convoys at a reasonable tariff. 3/10 of the cargo." She sealed it with black wax. The Kraken stamped deep and handed it off. "What if he refuses?" Theon asked. "Then every Trident Fork chokes on wreckage," Yara said. And the north will smell fresh-baked bread from my ovens, while their children chew leather. Her eyes were starlit obsidian, reflecting torch flame. For a heartbeat, Theon saw in them the ocean's ruthless horizon, uncaring, infinite. He wondered if his sister's heart had become that tide, unstoppable, unsympathetic, and yet brimming with a fierce, raw beauty. Westeros had birthed a dozen conquerors, but none like Yara, one who ruled not by castles or dragons, but by simple truths. Men needed to eat, and ships decided who did. Deep winter's black moon rose over King's Landing, and gaunt shadows crept across ruins still not cleared since the long night. Queen Asha Arryn, last falcon of the Vale, surveyed her shrinking court. Trade roads to the Reach lay severed, grain stores dwindled. Even the Vale's famed granaries, hidden behind mountain passes, sat nearly empty after months feeding their own refugees. And across Blackwater Bay floated an armada of black-sailed sentries keeping watch, making certain no Taroshi galleys arrived with relief. A raven scratched at the throne room's cracked window, leg bound with parchment. The master of ravens unrolled it, face blanching. Stark Winterfell petitioned for a summit at Moat Cailin, terms of alliance, perhaps surrender. Yara Greyjoy would attend in person, escorting 20 grain cogs north as gesture of goodwill. Queen Asha's hands trembled as she realized the game's final act had arrived. If the Starks bent the knee, northern ports would fly krakens, and every river mouth from Moat Cailin to the Arbor would belong to the Sea Queen. The Iron Throne would never rise again. Its ashes would feed kraken forges. And she, Asha of Arryn, would preside over a city of bones. She closed her eyes. Somewhere behind her eyelids loomed the eerie snow-white parapets, the memory of soaring eagles unmarred by iron smoke. The Vale still had ships, swift gull wings able to skirt pirate patrols along the fingers. But without safe harbors, they could not supply the capital. And every soldier marched on a stomach already gnawed hollow. Yet pride stirred. The Arryn Falcon did not cower to Iron Sea ravens. She summoned her last fleet admiral, command to gather every remaining war galley at Dragonstone's lee, where Cliff's mask launched from ironborn eyes. They would storm the blockade at dawn. Spearheaded by wildfire casks dredged from the undercellars, Cersei's apocalypse reforged to burn kraken sails. Sea Dragon's crow's nest spotted the enemy fleet cresting the cape just as false dawn trembled violet over Blackwater Rush. White gull-winged sails emblazoned with blue falcons swooped upon the outer picket, wildfire barrels slung beneath their yards. The first crack resounded like the splitting of sky. One barrel smashed against a picket's hull, green fire blossoming, devouring wet oak as if it were dry kindling. Yara, roused from chart calculations, vaulted up the companion ladder. Green tongues danced atop waves, reflected in her eyes. At her order, signal drums rattled, loose chain net. 2 blockade hulks lurched forward, unfurling an iron-linked net between them, weighted by stone boulders. They rode across the Falcon's path just as a second wave of wildfire barrels fell. One cracked, liquid emerald spilling across the iron links, but the flame clung there, suspended above water like a thrashing serpent. Falcon galleys raced on, keels carving a path too narrow. The lead galley's prow struck the submerged net. Momentum pitched her sideways into the green. Fire snarled up her sails, turning canvas to screaming ghosts. Behind, the Falcons twisted, trying to veer. Chaos amidst tight formation bred collision. 2 galleys locked yards, masts snapping. Another's rudder caught chain net and wrenched free, flipping stern overboard a tail. Wildfire spilled into seawater, igniting patches of floating pitch. Ironborn scorpions launched at will now, quarrels shearing through Falcon rigging. By sunrise, the Blackwater entrance burned green and black, littered with charred corpses and driftwood. Asha Arryn watched from the city walls, knuckles white. The hope of a starving kingdom burned before her eyes. And still across the bay, beyond the smoke, the Sea Queen's banner flew unscathed. Winterfell's rebuilt Great Hall smelled of oak smoke and cooking oats. Jon Snow, now Warden of the North by consent of a tired people, listened to the Southern envoy. An iron-gaunt woman bearing Yara's sigil. Outline, mutual prosperity. 20 grain cogs anchored off White Harbor as tokens. Another 100 could sail under Northern Charter next moon if the Starks acknowledged Yara's dominion of southern seas and paid annual tribute. 10 gold chests, 1,000 longbowmen for coastal garrison, and rights for Ironborn to harvest timber in the Wolfswood. Sansa Stark, seated beside Jon, kept her face impassive. She calculated. The North's fields were thin, her people eating bark broth by deep winter's heart. 100 cogs of grain could stave off famine till next planting. But the Wolfswood was the heart of their land, and tribute and men shackled them to foreign war. Jon dismissed the envoy with courtesy. Silence filled the hall after her bootsteps faded. Then the murmurs began, lords whose daughters shrank to shadows, whose bannermen deserted rather than watch children starve. Yara's quills carved hope into despair. Yet a woman who commanded seas might command hasty respect, but not love. And the North remembered foreign chains. Jon rose, cloak heavy with nightwolf fur. This is no alliance, it is surrender. The North endured the long night. We can endure hunger. Let the Kraken strangle itself on greed. Many shouted in approval. Others turned faces pale with fear. Sansa's eyes flicked to the shuttered windows, where wind howled like distant surf. She wondered if hunger might break them before Kraken greed did. War on sea they could not win. War on land might buy breathing room. But winter did not care whose banners flew. It only took. In Old Town's Ravenry Tower, Yara studied the reports. The Falcon fleet burned. The North refused terms. The Riverlords squabbled over dwindling barges. She traced her finger from Pike to White Harbor, to Gulltown, then back to Old Town. One head left to sever. She murmured. She would march not by land but by river. A chain of fortified barges pushing against the Trident's current, each bristling with ballistae, each carrying grain enough to bribe starving villages into opening weirs. She would sail past river-run skirts and anchor within arrow range of Harrenhal's ruin, daring any lord to burn his own last bread. And when snowmelt filled the rivers come spring, she would ride that flood north, slip through the next maze, and disgorge her forces at the foot of Moat Cailin. Ironborn feet would tread sodden northern earth for the first time since Euron's aborted raid. This time, not to pillage, but to plant the Kraken standard in wolf soil. Theon watched her eyes shimmer with the dream. And what then? He asked softly. When the wolves break? When all Westeros kneels. Then? Yara gazed across the city she had taken, its spires now crowned with black banners, its streets thrumming with hammer and forge. Then we build, she whispered. We turn longships into sea keeps, driftwood into towers, raids into trade. The seas will feed the land, and the land will feed the seas. And my children, her voice caught, a flicker of vulnerability, will never know the taste of famine or the shame of stealing what should have been theirs by strength. Lightning forked beyond the horizon, thunder of a brewing storm rolling toward the bay. Yara welcomed its rumble like a drumbeat. Another tide gathering, another wave to ride. In her mind she already saw the Kraken's tentacles encircling the map entire, squeezing until no coast, no river mouth, no port could breathe without her leave. Westeros would learn the oldest lesson of all. Water wears stone, and salt endures. The storm broke, rain hammering slate shingles. Yara stepped to the balcony, arms spread to feel the downpour. Theon joined her. Together they gazed out at the harbor where ranks of ships rocked, masts like spears jutting toward the heavens. Behind them the beacon cast a golden halo, turning raindrops into falling embers. Below, in muddy markets, Reachmen and Ironborn bartered loaf for labor, while Tyrell prisoners stacked barrels under Kraken overseers. Children splashed in puddles that smelled of fish and smoke. Old wives braised stew in cauldrons of seawater and stolen turnips. Life persisted, reshaped by the tide. Yara felt its pulse beneath her feet, steady, relentless. She closed her eyes and pictured that pulse spreading outward along every river artery, every wave crest, every salt ford crossing. A heartbeat of water. A siege of seas. A realm conquered not by sword alone, but by the silence of empty larders and the roar of hungry tides. When she opened her eyes, dawn was bleeding rose along the horizon. Tomorrow, the river expedition would depart. Tomorrow more keeps would burn or bend. And someday, perhaps soon, the direwolf of the north would bow its head to the kraken of the sea. She smiled into the rain, letting it wash salt from her brow, and whispered a vow to the waves below. Let the mainland starve for breath. I will teach it to breathe water. Down. And down. Snow-laden clouds dragged across a bruised sky as Yara's river fleet advanced into the riverlands. From the deck of the Brine Wolf, she watched barges chained boat astern push against the trident sluggish current, great paddle wheels turning like grim millstones. Black iron plates banded each hull. Scorpion towers studded their decks. Grain casks the size of crypt stones filled the holds. Stacked beneath pitch barrels and spears. A floating fortress. Slow, implacable, and, to the hungry villages along the banks, a beacon of impossible salvation. The convoy's vanguard hoisted banners of stained canvas, gray for salt, gold for grain. The code was simple. Approach under the gray, and you offered tribute. Under the gold, you begged to trade. That morning, 5 hamlets had hurried out in fishing skiffs, raising torn bedsheets, renouncing whatever lord had failed them. They left with sacks of oats and barrels of salted fish, their meager silver taken in pledge to serve as river pilots. Hushed prayers followed the barges upstream, prayers that the Kraken Queen would never think them fat enough to gut. Near midday, a froth of white water marked the confluence with the Red Fork. Yara shaded her eyes. 2 galleys bearing the mermen of House Manderley lay half-hidden among reeds, oars shipped, prows angled like watchful pikes. Diplomacy's husk. She signaled halt. The paddle wheels slowed, engines venting steam. Her personal cutter slid down on block and tackle. She leapt in, Theon at the tiller. 6 shieldmen followed, cloaks slick with rime. They rowed into quiet water. On the nearest galley's deck stood Sir Medric Manderley, snow-crusted beard stiff as larder frost. Lady Greyjoy, he hailed, voice raw. Wah. You sail ill waters. The north claims these rivers. Yara's laugh rang through cold mist. Claim away. The ice wolf may gnash, but it cannot swim. Sir Medric's gaze drifted to the chain barges, to the trebuchet silhouettes against iron sky. Hunger darkened his eyes. King John asks you turn south. Your blockade strangles folk. Release the arbor in Gulltown, and he will open markets to you. Markets? Yara echoed. What coin buys grain when fields lie under snow? Trade me the wolf's wood, cedar masts for my hulls. Do that, and I'll sell you bread at less than the cost of iron nails. A muscle jumped in the knight's jaw. You call that mercy. I call it slow murder. Yara's smile iced. Murder is quick. Ask the drowned. This is mastery. She lifted a hand. Brine Wolf's deck scorpion cranked, coral head glimmering like a frozen fang. Sir Medric's archers reached for bowstrings. Loosen the river runs red. Yara's words rode a gust. Tell your king. The Sea Queen marches. Meet me at Moat Cailin with timber rights signed and sealed, or watch your people harvest each other before the thaw. Menshador. The stair between them stretched taut. Then, Sir Medric spat overboard. The north remembers. He whipped a hand in signal. The galleys backed water, turning in the reeds to vanish down the Red Fork. Theon exhaled slowly. They may light beacons. Stark outriders shadow us. Let them. Yara glanced upriver where leafless willows clawed sky, their roots half frozen in sludge. Every trail they tramp pounds more mud off hungry boots. By the time they muster, their horses will chew bark. Thou. She caught Theon's hesitation. Speak. He worked his scarred knuckles on the tiller. You choke them too hard and they'll snap. Wolves cornered bite deeper than sharks. Bite water they drown, she said, climbing back to the ladder. We sail before dusk. North of the Twins, the peat bogs of the Neck steamed beneath pale sun. Moat Cailin's ragged towers rose from murk like the ribs of a dead leviathan. Jon Snow surveyed them from behind a crenelle, breath ghosting. Frost had stone-bit every mortar joint. The causeway south resembled a spine of black ice. His scouts reported the Kraken fleet only 3 days sailed downriver, floating siege towers unstoppable by marshy ground. The wall had fallen to ice and fire. Now rivers threatened to bring ruin anew. Beside him stood Sansa, cloak lined in marten fur, hair braided tight against wind. Her cheeks burned red, but her gaze was calmer than Jon's. "They need landfall," she murmured. "Those barges cannot climb the causeway. Force them to abandon water, and they lose their armor." Jon nodded. "We mine the bank, flood the ditches, draw them into the choke." Yet cold logic weighed on him heavier than the sword at his hip. Even if the neck swallowed half the Ironborn, Yara still commanded the seas. Spring sowing would fail without southern seeds. The north faced starvation. Victory in mud might spell defeat at the harvest. That night he convened his war council. Karstark, Mormont, Glover, Reed. Torches hissed in the damp. Jon laid maps across a slab, fingers tracing river lines like old scars. "We fight," he said, voice rough. "But we must also feed. Yara's price for grain is timber. The wolf's wood cannot be surrendered." "Mentor." "How then?" asked Mage Mormont, fists on hips. "Pray for summer pigs to fly north with bread." Sansa stepped forward. "We make Yara doubt the seas. Strike where she feels strongest." Jorah Reed lifted a brow. "A fleet? We cannot build ships fast enough." "Not ships," Sansa said. "Faith." She unrolled a smaller parchment. On it, crude sketches of towers, cliffs, and tide patterns. "Bear Island cliffs," she explained. "Deep channels, hidden shoals. A skilled pilot could lure part of her armada onto reef." "Now, a trap," Jon muttered. Hope flickered. He doused it with realism. "But to bait her, you must promise something she cannot refuse." "Grain," Sansa answered. "A convoy from Bravos. We let word leak of Taroshi cogs, filled with barley, bound for White Harbor, unguarded but swift. Yara will chase. When her outriders near Bear Island, we shutter the lighthouse, shift beacon fires, guide them to breakers." Carrot Glover frowned. "A convoy that does not exist." Sansa's lips curved. "It will exist, in rumor enough for hungry ears. Pirates will boast. Merchants will beg escorts, until even Yara's spies believe." Jon gripped the hilt of Longclaw. "Risky. If she smells deceit, she turns full force on Moat Cailin before we're ready." "Which is why," Sansa said, "gaze steel. We make the rumor true." Silence fell. She turned to Reed. "Greywater men know the bite of salt only in stories. You will sail to Bravos with Stark silver. Buy grain, 40,000 bushels, enough to tempt a queen of famine." Reed blinked. "Bravos is half the world away." "I know." Sansa's voice softened. "But steel alone will not win. We must risk silver as well. If it arrives, wonderful. If it does not, Yara chases ghosts while we staunch her river thrust." "Men." Jon searched his sister's eyes. He saw Ned's steadiness there, Catelyn's cunning, and something harder, born of Ramsay's cruelty. He nodded. "Do it." On the Red Fork's upper reaches, Yara's barges anchored at dusk. A cold drizzle dimpled the river. Lamps glowed within iron slits. Theon found her on Brynwolf's aft castle studying a missive captured from a ferryman courier. She didn't hear him until he spoke. "Bad news." Yara's eyes gleamed. "Opportunity. Bravosi grain convoy sighted off Skagos, bound for White Harbor. 10 cogs, lightly escorted." "Then?" Theon's brow furrowed. "Bravos sells to whoever pays." "Stark coffers?" "They're rich in pride, poor in coin," Yara said. "Yet rumor claims they found silver, enough to lure 10 cogs. If true, the North buys breathing room. If false, they bluff." She turned, wind whipping her cloak. Either way, those cogs sail through waters I rule. We take them. Their grain fills our holds. The tale breaks stark morale. And now, what of the river campaign? Staggers forward without me. She pointed to a broad-shouldered first mate. Aaron commands. He'll beach at Saltpans, fortify supply. I lead the raider wing north. Theon's mouth tightened. Bear Island seas are treacherous. Treacherous for those who fear reefs. Yara clapped his shoulder. You will remain. Guard the barges until Moat Cailin falls. He stiffened. I swore to fight beside you. You swore to serve your queen. Her tone brooked no dispute. Yet in her eyes flickered a hint of regret. She leaned close, voice low. I need someone here I trust. Aaron reeks of zeal. Zeal blinds. Keep him aimed at Moat Cailin. Theon bowed his head. Duty warred with dread. He remembered Bear Island's surf. Green-gray teeth hungry for hulls. He remembered, too, Sansa's kindness in dark days. War twisted love and loyalty into knots impossible to untie. That night Yara's war wing, a score of sleek longships, slipped north beneath blank stars. The barges pressed on alone, sails swollen with westerlies. The neck awaited. At dawn of the seventh day the river squadron ground to a halt. Thick fog clung to willow stands. Unseen drums beat faintly through the murk. Wooden, rhythmic, slow. The barges drifted into a channel that narrowed like a strangler's fist. Reeds scratched iron hulls. Dead trees jutted from water like broken spears. Aaron Damfair stood on the prow, arms outstretched in benediction. Forward, he cried. The drowned god parts the mists. But the water shoaled. Paddle wheels churned mud. Axle gears screeched. Suddenly, a gout of fire erupted from the bank. Archers loosing fire arrows soaked in tallow. One arrow found a pitch barrel. Flame blossomed. Screams split fog. From both banks, northern skirmishers rose, reed-clad, cloaked in swamp colors. They loosed arrows, vanished, reappeared. Ballistae returned fire but could not find targets in mist. Then came the groan of wood. Massive log rafts, unmoored upstream, surged on the current. They slammed against barge sides with skull-rattling force, studs of iron spikes punching through hull plates. Water spewed in. Aaron bellowed prayers, heedless of shafts thudding his mail. He swung a lantern trying to burn the rafts free. A spear caught him in the thigh. He toppled screaming over rail into black water. Drowned men leapt after, but the current sucked them beneath. Theon, aboard the third barge, watched chaos unfold. Smoke curtained the river. Screams echoed. He seized command horn. "Cut chains," he roared. Sailors hewed at links binding barges. Some freed themselves from burning sisters, paddles reversing to pull back. Others, lamed, drifted onto sandbars, capsizing under log impact. A chorus of war horns answered from the fog. Deep, mournful, not iron-born? Reed, war horns. Shadows flickered. Small boats propelled by poles, men wielding tar-coated jars. They flung them, glass shattered on hulls. Flame crawled like hungry lizards. Theon's vessel lurched as a log cracked its starboard quarter. He ordered oars run, turning for deeper mid-current. An arrow grazed his cheek. He tasted blood and river mud. He glimpsed a slender figure on the bank raising a torch. Mira Reed? Impossible to tell. But the glee in that posture made his gut clench. Hour by grinding hour the Ironborn fought for river. By sunset, only 5 barges remained afloat. Hulls scarred and smoking. Half their grain lost to water, half their pitch expended. The river folk melted into reeds, leaving wreckage and corpses to the dusk. Theon stood on deck amid charred timbers, heart pounding. Around him sailors whispered. The drowned god had turned face. The queen gone north, chasing ghosts. Aaron may be dead. Morale cracked like thin ice. He knew if this broke, Moat Cailin would never fall. Yara's dream unraveled. He lifted sword, voice ragged yet strong. Bind wounds. Jettison wreckage. We press on. Now. A boatswain spat. Why? To drown in bog. Theon strode to him, pressed blade to throat. Because you are ironborn. Fear is for shore rats. His voice shook, but in the eyes of his crew he saw flickers of old terror, Reek's ghost banished by something fiercer. They obeyed. Fires were quenched, hull leaks plugged with wool and tar. Under moonlight the crippled convoy crept, paddles whispering. Hundreds of leagues northwest, Bear Island's volcanic cliffs rose jagged against a slate horizon. A sullen swell smashed themselves into the stony maws, sending plumes of spindrift skyward. In sheltered coves raged beacon fires, arranged by Sansa's plan. 2 green, 1 red, shifting signals nightly to maintain illusion of safe passage. Hidden within a sea cave, perched a team of Mormont sailors, manning horn relays. Far out to sea, Yara's vanguard fanned in scouting arcs. Their prows sliced foam, eyes peeled for the promised Braavosi cogs. Cold spray whipped faces. Gulls wheeled overhead, hungry. Day after day they found only empty expanse and the distant glimmer of Bear Island's shifting beacons. Yet on the 5th dawn, a column of white sails winked on the horizon, 10 cogs plodding westward, hulls deep laden. Yara felt triumph surge. She ordered 3 outridders to encircle, 2 to dart ahead through the supposed safe channel. She held main force in reserve, waiting to pincer. As sun climbed, the outriders signaled depth poles. They found safe water, 7 fathoms, no shoal. Yara advanced, confidence as firm as the deck beneath her boots. The trap sprang at dusk. Bear Island's beacon fires abruptly vanished. New flares ignited atop unseen cliff towers, lining a false channel. Her vanguard turned toward it. Yara, frowning, checked soundings. Steady 6 fathoms. Then, in a single breath, all changed. The keel jarred. A grinding roar thundered along hull timbers. The Sea Dragon pitched forward, masts shuddering. Reef. Yara barked for reverse oars. Too late. Following ships plowed into her stern, momentum shoving them onto jagged rocks. Masts splintered. Sails tore free. Men tumbled screaming into freezing surf. Seconds later, from high on the cliffs, catapults launched, boulders shattered hulls already gut-torn. Then came firepots. Oil spread across waves, fire-licking wreckage. The cargo cogs turned seaward, revealing stark direwolf banners. Their holds had never carried grain. Their timbers were stripped to lighten draft, sails painted to appear laden. They fled with tailwind while Yara's flagship heeled against reef teeth. She stood amid ruin, wind tearing at her hair, taste of salt blood in her mouth. Rage burned, but clarity colder than winter steel iced her veins. She had been outplayed. She could not save these ships, but she could salvage victory. Strike fear, not flee. She ordered signal flares. All remaining vessels scatter south. Regroup at Sealskin Point. Her own crew she rallied to pump bilges, throw ballast. Sea Dragon shuddered free on outgoing tide, belly torn but afloat. 6 escorts limped after her. 9 lay cracked upon reefs, fire-licking masts like funeral pyres. Behind, the stark decoys hoisted lanterns in mocking salute. Yara watched until night swallowed them. She lowered her gaze, knuckles white on rail. The sea had betrayed her, or she had forgotten to fear it. Pride tasted of blood. Word of the Bear Island victory flew south with ravens faster than ships. In Winterfell's hall, the cheer that erupted rattled chandeliers. Sansa allowed herself a small smile, but Jon remained somber. "We wounded her," he said. "Not felled." The grain convoy purchased in Braavos still lagged leagues distant, should it arrive through patrolling Kraken nets. Yet morale mattered. Lords once ready to capitulate now pledged men. Blacksmiths hammered arrowheads, women stitched banners. Jon dispatched fresh skirmishers to the neck with supplies of lamp oil and frog-crotched arrows to harrow what remained of Yara's barges. As snows deepened, northern archers fitted broadheads to shafts, ready to hunt iron prey sliding through white mist. Sansa wrote cryptic letters to Braavos, instructing merchants to scatter rumors of a second, richer convoy. Confusion was a weapon sharper than Valyrian steel. She intended to bleed Yara with it. In the neck, the battle dragged into attrition. Every mile Theon pushed north. Reeds grew thicker, channels narrower. Northern skirmishers struck by night. Torches tossed onto tar-soaked nets. Caltrop mats floating downstream to snag rudders, poisoned barbs whistling from grass. Theon's eyes purpled with sleeplessness. He ate saltfish on the run, patched leaks until fingers blistered. But each dawn 1 or 2 barges still floated, black silhouettes against pale sky. He would not fail her again. At last the towers of Moat Cailin rose before them. Winter sun glittered on broken ramparts. The causeway leading north lay stacked with sharpened stakes, trenches filled with slush. Stark banners flapped, blue deerwolves on white. The neck's marsh water lapped at their prow timbers like slurping tongues. Theon studied the defenses through spyglass. Engines lined the wall. Ballistae, scorpions, catapults. Fires burned in braziers ready to hurl pitch. Yet behind those walls, he knew, hunger gnawed. He'd seen it in the hollows of captured scouts' cheeks. Months of blockade had starved even Moat Cailin's salted stores. Wolves were lean. He mustered his remaining men, less than 400 sea wolves, many wounded. Barges offloaded scorpions onto hastily built rafts. Sailors pulled them toward bank emplacements. Under covering arrow fire, they erected mantlets of wet hides. Soon quarrels hammered the ramparts, puncturing shields, seeking gaps in stark mail. Return fire cracked, splintered, burned. One raft exploded when a firepot struck. Men flailed screaming, flames dancing on swamp water. Theon pressed the assault, shifting ballista platforms closer under cover of rising tide. If they could breach the old southern gate, even a handful of reavers could wedge inside. Open causeway for the rest. He drew Reek's memories like venom, turning pain into fury. Each bolt he loosed felt like expiation. Through arrow slits, Jon watched the Ironborn advance. Snow drifted lazily, melting on hot quarrels. His archers thinned as hunger sapped strength. But the moat still offered deadly embrace. He ordered pitch cauldrons tip. Black flames roared across water. The Ironborn rafts recoiled, men diving. Yet still, they came. Theon's scorpion charred yet whirled again. A ballista bolt slammed the gate's rotten plank, crunching through wood. A second bolt followed, tearing a gap enough for 2 men abreast. Jon called Mormont shield maidens forward. Sansa, atop parapet, saw the breach and felt cold fingers at her heart. This was the knife edge. Win here, and Yara's spree ended in bog. Lose, and the kraken's tentacle wrapped the wolf's throat. Night scraped across the swamp, but battle burned on. Theon rallied his last reavers, axes gleaming. They waded chest-deep through icy water beneath covering arrow fire. One by one they clambered over the burned gate's remains. Northern defenders hacked down the first 3. The 4th breached, hurled a torch into a tar barrel. Explosion spat fire, scattering shield line. Reavers poured in. Theon's boots hit stone within the keep's yard. He howled a name once stripped from him. Greyjoy, and drove onward. Jon met him midway. Longclaw collided with Axehaft. For an instant, the world shrank to 2 broken brothers, past and present clashing beneath snow-choked sky. Theon's axe chipped Valyrian blade. Sparks sprang. Jon's riposte opened a gash along Theon's arm, but the Ironborn pressed, eyes wild with purpose. Around them the yard churned with combat. Mormont shields against kraken bucklers, mud slick with mingled blood. Torches guttered, snow hissed on ember. Sansa watched from the parapet, words lodged behind her teeth. She had forgiven Theon once, dare she root for his death now? The duel raged. Jon's stamina flagged under weeks of lean meals. Theon, half-starved too, fought as a man possessed, teeth clenched. A glancing blow slashed Jon's thigh. He staggered. Theon raised axe for killing stroke. Their gazes locked, memories flooding. Winterfell's hearth. Boys sparring in courtyard. Dead choices irreversible. The axe descended and halted. Theon's arm shook. Images of Yara, of starving smallfolk he'd spared on riverbanks, of Sansa's silent kindness flickered through him. He could end a king's line, or he could parley a peace Yara would never grant. Mercy was not ironborn, but he was more than that. Stark spears lunged. They caught Theon through ribs, jerking him back. He exhaled, surprise rather than pain on his face, and crumpled. Jon shoved forward, slashing enemy ranks to reach him. Underfoot, the ground seemed to tilt. Theon's blood pooled black in moonlight. "Hold!" Jon roared. Combat slackened around them, fighters breathing ragged. He knelt beside the fallen Greyjoy who chuckled wetly. "Tell her," Theon whispered, breath thin. "The sea can drown itself." His eyes closed. The yard fell silent save for crackle of fire, hiss of snow. The ironborn raiders, seeing their commander fall, wavered. A horn sounded from ramparts. Reed skirmishers emerged from swamp paths, cutting off retreat. Within moments, the reavers surrendered or died. The breach sealed with corpses and sapling stakes. Dawn rose over Moat Cailin, painting frost pink. Northern banners still flew. Sealskin Point, battered by gales, played host to the shattered remains of Yara's war wing. Carpenters labored night and day patching hulls, splicing masts. Yara allowed no morning fires. Every splinter fed furnaces to recast nails. But inside her cabin, she stared at a damp parchment delivered by Raven. Jon's hand informing of Theon's death in honorable combat, offering his body back for rights. Her fingers trembled. She crumpled the note, then smoothed it again. Smudging ink. Grief warred with pride. Theon had been her anchor, the voice that questioned when she charged. Without him, the coin weight of every decision felt heavier. The sea outside pounded cliffs like an accusing drum. She recalled her father saying the sea forgave nothing. She had believed herself stronger than tides. Now she knew. Tides carved cliffs and hearts alike. She went topside. Storm clouds churned. Wind knotted hair across her crown. Crew watched. Some with awe, some with fear, as she strode to the prow, lifted a horn, and blew a note long as sorrow. "Tonight," she announced, "we send a king's brother to the drowned god. Tomorrow we sail south." South, a boatswain dared. "The war at Moat Cailin is lost," Yara said. Saying it tasted of iron. "The north bleeds but stands. So we tighten the noose elsewhere. Gulltown, Sunspear, even Bravos. Let them all choke. No harbor, no reprieve." A murmur swept the deck, some confusion, some approval. Yara met each gaze with flame. The Ironborn do not cling to one battle. We ride waves. The sea rose, it will rise again. Every realm needs fish. Passage. I will hold them ransom till time itself drowns. Now. Deep within her, she knew hunger might breed unity against her eventually, that dragons perhaps might hatch again, that storms could smash fleets. But ambition driven by grief is a furnace, for now. She would feed it. That night, Theon's body, born on driftwood beer, slid beneath black waves. Yara whispered a promise to the surf. The world would remember him not as broken but as breaker of gates. Foam swallowed his shroud. Waves closed. Above, the storm broke, rain lashing until dawn. At first light, Yara unfurled new sails dyed deepest indigo, morning banners that mirrored tempest seas. The fleet pulled anchor, oars biting foam. Behind them, bare islands' reefs hissed under receding tide like serpents denied prey. Eastward, in Bravos harbor, grain cogs heavy with barley prepared to weigh anchor for White Harbor under cover of fog. Unaware iron-shod prows hunted beyond horizon. In Winterfell, Johanna Reed returned with coin coffers half spent, and hope half founded. In Old Town's harbor, Tyrell prisoners sharpened sickles under ironborn overseers, plotting. And across harried Westeros, ravens flitted, carrying news of hunger, defeat, resolve, each message filtered by the understanding that the seas no longer whispered with salt wind alone, but with the voice of a queen who had conquered fear, if not yet the realm. Ships creaked. Wind filled sails. Yara gripped the wheel, eyes shining with rain and unshed tears. Ahead lay endless horizons. So many coasts to squeeze, so many hearts to starve or sway. Salt endured, stone cracked, water remembered. And she would teach Westeros every one of those truths, 7 times over, until the very map changed color beneath her tide. The horn sounded again. The fleet turned east, hulls slicing gray water like knives. Somewhere beyond storms, the world still thought in terms of castles and crowns. But Yara Greyjoy sailed to remind it that before walls were built, there was the sea, and after walls fell, the sea remained, patient, inexorable, and, under her hand, almighty. The wind veered south-southwest, hot as a kiln even here in the temperate seas off the fingers, stripping the air of its briny sting and replacing it with something drear, scorched, almost Dornish. Yara sensed the omen as she always did, by the taste on her tongue, by the way the horizon shimmered like hammered bronze instead of dull pewter. Summer's last breath was exhaling early, and that meant lighter winds for her patched-together war-wing and heavier sails for the fat Braavosi convoy, rumored to be plying the bight in search of White Harbor. The gods or the currents, or both, were conspiring to give her hunting weather at the very hour she needed it most. She stood bare-armed on Sea Dragon's quarterdeck, the torn sleeve of her leather jerkin fluttering against the curved steel of her newly forged axe. The smiths on Sealskin Point had folded Bear Island iron with salvaged reach steel, welding grief and resolve into a single edge. Tonight, she tested it on the foam-slick skin of the sea. Tomorrow, on hull planks filled with Braavosi grain. Around her, the rebuilt ships groaned and flexed like half-healed wolves rising from a bloody sleep. 9 longships with fresh pine ribs, 5 arrow-sleek skiffs captured from red wine patrols, and Sea Dragon herself, gutted, caulked every third frame still held together with oakum and prayer, yet proud. The lookouts called sail at dusk. A scatter of white triangles glittered far to leeward, lined up like gulls following a fisher's wake. They flew the purple pinecone of Braavos, and, beneath that, the gray direwolf of Stark. That double standard stung Yara like a nettle. She'd once half-mended bridges with the Starks. Theon's bones now lay under Bear Island waves because Jon Snow and Sansa Stark had outfoxed her. That wrong required repayment. And coin was best paid in iron, the heartbreak of losing the very cargo that might see northern children through the winter. She snapped orders. The leanest skiffs, Shy Maid, Wave Viper, and Taker of Tithes, peeled away on starboard tack, their prows dipping into chop to circle ahead of the convoy. Scant moonlight kissed their wet rails as they vanished into gloom, where the northern coast black cliffs merged with blacker clouds. The longships, hulls low in the water from extra ballast stones, fanned out in a crescent behind her flagship. Oars rose and fell without a splash, each blade muffled in felt. Sailcloth came in, only windless, stealthy rowing now. They would be ghosts until the minute they chose to roar. Night swallowed color. Time became the hush between heartbeats, measured only by the distant squeal of gulls and the rhythmic creak of tholopans. Yara crouched by the tiller's lantern, mapping closing angles on a slate with a nub of chalk, wiping, redrawing. Wind shifted again, west this time, cooler, and with it drifted a sound halfway between song and chatter. Sailors on the Braavosi cogs relaxed, unsuspecting. They thought themselves deep inside the Stark protection cordoned on. They had no notion that the queen who owned the seas had already slipped inside the wolves' pickets. A shout erupted across Sea Dragon's OAC. Lanterns doused all ships. Yara rose, rolled her shoulders, inhaled brine. She tapped the haft of her axe against the rail 3 times. Signal to shy maids boarded lookout. Moments later, a tiny spark winked atop the dark sea half a league ahead, confirmation of the trap's mouth closing. The rest was momentum. At 3 cables distance, Yara's drummer struck the oak barrel with rawhide mallet. 3 slow beats, pause, 3 again. A chant began low among the oarsmen. The ancient syllables of a drowning prayer turned into battle hymn. It carried over the water like thunder buried under waves. Lanterns flared on the Braavosi cogs, startled voices barking. And then Sea Dragon's forward scorpion belched a bolt the thickness of a young mast. It punched through the lead cog's forecastle like a thrown spear through rotten fruit. Someone screamed. Someone else shouted for the 7. Bodies thumped on deck. Yara's ship swept in, prow rigs lobbing clay jugs stuffed with oil-soaked tow and stoppered with pitch. They burst, showering spark and flame. The convoy tried to scatter but found Shy Maid and Wave Viper in their path, oars biting like crocodile jaws, herding them back toward the oncoming crescent. One cog attempted to turn north. Taker of Tithes rammed her amidships, iron beak grinding through half-caulked planks, then disengaged, leaving the cog sagging like a broken lung. Yara chose her moment. Sea Dragon's ram kissed the largest cog, the one bearing a high stern castle painted with twin Braavosi courtyards, just aft of the rudder. The crunch sent shivers up through her boots. She vaulted the rail with 8 shield bearers, landing on enemy deck as crossbow bolts hummed overhead. Her axe rose, angled down. The first sailor to reach her wore a stark surcoat. She kicked him in the knee and buried the blade in his collarbone. Blood misted, hot and sweet. The second came from behind, a Braavosi sellsword swinging a cutlass. She parried with the axe haft, reversed grip, caved his temple. Battle turned into blur. Screams, clang of steel, the taste of iron rich as wine. When finally the cog lay subdued, its deck awash with grain kernels, broken lantern glass, and twice as much blood, Yara kicked open the stern castle door. Inside, bound scroll satchels lay stacked to the beams. She ripped one open. Trade contracts in Braavosi. Another satchel hid coin, silver moon stamped with the Titan. And there, sealed letters from Sansa Stark to the Braavosi Sea Lords, promising further shipments, promising high tariff exemptions for merchants who braved the blockade. Yara's laugh was raw triumph. Her marines dragged the Braavosi captain, a thin, olive-skinned man with quick black eyes, out of hiding. She pressed him to his knees amid spilled barley, lifting his chin with axe tip. How many more convoys? The captain trembled. 2. Maybe 3, this moon. We sail without weapons, my lady, only grain. The Titan forbids war tort. Meawum? War follows grain, she said, voice velvet. Tell your sea lords the seas are closed until they pay tribute in ships. 10 hulls for every cog we let pass, else, not a bushel leaves the narrow sea. The man nodded rapidly. She yanked him upright. Now gather your dead. The living will row these cogs to Old Town with me. Above, the night eased shyly toward dawn. 6 cogs lay afloat, their sails slashed but hulls sound. 2 burned, lighting the sea green and violet where lamp oil met rising sun. Yara's fleet, scarcely scratched, fanned to either side, rigging tow lines, dousing small fires. The raid was textbook, quick, decisive, crippling. Yet as the sun's edge peered over eastern swells, she remembered the cost measured not in ships, but in trust. White Harbor's children would tighten belts another notch tonight. Let them. Hunger tempered people into sharper weapons, or broke them into obedient tools. Either suited her. The ravens that winged north flew heavy with dismay. At Winterfell, maesters unraveled note after note. Convoy taken, cogs diverted, no survivors beyond a score of prisoners ransomed at Gulltown. Jon Snow read them in stony silence. Beside him Sansa folded her hands, blood draining from her knuckles, where they gripped the chairs carved direwolves. The hall's hearth crackled, throwing heat against cold stone but not against the chill that settled inside her chest. She had gambled on grain and rumor. Yara had devoured both. Jon broke the silence first. Moat Cailin still holds. We buy time. Sansa lifted her gaze. Time? For what? We cannot conjure new harvests. Fishery Aishe houses are dry. River traps yield bones. I asked men to lie, and honest infants will pay in ribs and bellies. Then? The Isles claim dominion of water, Jon replied. So we deny water. She frowned. He stood, paced before the fire. Yara's power rests on ports, in Old Town, in the Arbor. We can't match her fleet, but we can bleed her harbors. How? We've no raiders fit for such waters. Jon turned, eyes shadowed. We don't need ships. We need fever. It took Sansa a heartbeat. The pale mare. Not plague, he said quickly. But rumor of plague. A single sick galley scuttled outside Old Town, its crew coughing blood. Another corpse raft drifting into the Arbor's inlet. Seal the quarantine chain. Half her garrison will flee inland. Now. Sansa's stomach clenched. Manufacture horror. Yara's terror is hunger. We answer terror with fear. He exhaled. I hate it. But choice shrinks each day. She nodded slowly, the strategist in her measuring risk. We'd need volunteers. They'd likely die for real. I know men, Jon said quietly. Broken men. They'll trade life for families fed. If we promise them. Sansa looked into his eyes and saw the boy who once clung to honor like ice to winter branches. That boy was cracking. She mourned him even as she accepted the fracture's necessity. She touched his arm. If we do this, we do it swiftly, mercifully, and we remember the names. Jon swallowed. Far to the south in Old Town, hammers rang from dawn till dusk. What had begun as makeshift stockades around the harbor gate had burgeoned into a true fortress. Stone ramparts cannibalized from fallen sceptry walls, scorpion towers fashioned from the bones of merchant granaries. Black kraken banners snapped above them, sewn from canvas that once shaded Tyrell vintages. Yet beneath this martial veneer, the city simmered. Reachfolk apprentices whispered about missing cousins. Citadel acolytes swapped coated slips of vellum. In taverns smoke-hazed with arbor brandy, talk turned to a single date scrawled on alley walls. Feast day. Lady Corinna Tyrell, pretender though she seemed after the great house's collapse, wore servant's drab and moved among these whispers like a cat. She lingered by bakers' ovens, listening to complaints about salt rationing. She helped old folk carry water, her ear tuned to which blacksmiths muttered most loudly about lost sons. By night she met in a candle-lit cell beneath the starry sept, with 3 maesters, 2 former Red Wine officers, and an aging singer who once served as court bard for Highgarden. Each meeting ended the same. They would ignite the powder kegs Yara had piled beneath her own throne, given enough spark. When the Braavosi cogs arrived under Kraken escort, laden not with salvation for the hungry north, but with spoils for Yara's granaries, the city's tension stretched taut as bowstring. Corinna knew it by the sudden hush in market squares, by the way children were shooed indoors at sunset without explanation. A storm of fury brewed, waiting only thunder. The thunder came in the form of a single bell. Saint's Bell, oldest in Old Town, forged from the melted relics of 4 defeated raider captains 1,000 years ago. Yara had ordered it silent when she seized the harbor. On the night of feast day, Corinna's rebels overpowered the lone Ironborn watch at the belfry and set it clanging. The sound rolled over rooftops in waves, calling the faithful to prayer or to rebellion. Within minutes, city folk poured from doorways carrying cleavers, pitchforks, even kitchen ladles. They flooded Ledger Square, chanting bread and rose, an echo of Margaery's slogan now twisted against the foreign tyrant. Torchlight flickered on ramparts where Ironborn guards took stance. Arrows hissed downward, a boy fell, torch rolling to gutter in his blood. The crowd surged, screaming. Revolution ignited. Karenna led a wedge of former red wine marines through a deserted wine vault, up a forgotten stair, emerging inside the customs house. They seized scorpions Yara had stored for shipping north, pivoted them, and fired into Kraken positions along the seawall. On the first bolt, 2 ironclad spearmen toppled beyond parapet, arms wind-milling. Cheers roared from the mob. Citadel novices flung jars of wildfire, stolen from pyromancers' labs. Green plumes erupted, turning harbor night into nightmare. Yara's governor, a grizzled reaver named Bormund Foulbreath, rallied his men. They formed shield walls, advanced into the old fish market, axes rising and falling. But for every rebel cut down, 3 more appeared. Bakers in flour-spattered tunics hauled cauldrons of boiling honey, sloshing them onto ironborn helms. Butchers swung cleavers. A pack of septas from the Mother's Mercy cloister waded in with spiked maces, meant for penance, chanting hymns over the screams. Hours stretched. Blood slicked every cobble. At dawn the rebels held 3 of 5 gates, but the Ironborn still commanded the harbor and the towers. Karenna climbed the belfry again, scanning water. Sea Dragon was sighted north 4 days ago, but Yara's second fleet, those refitted Shield Islands hulks, lay anchored mid-river, scorpions ready. The city might burn before liberation if a single barrage set tinder-dry shingles alight. She breathed smoke, clenched fists. One more push, she whispered to the bell's cracked flank. If the North and Dorne strike now, the Sea Queen loses her jewel. Ravens had flown, but who knew if wings outran tides? In the Vale, Queen Asha Aaron had not slept more than 4 hours in any one night since the Greenfire massacre of her doomed fleet. Her advisors tried brandies, powder-dusted wines, even milk of the poppy. Nothing banished the images. Green flames crawling up falcon sails, men leaping, flesh melting. Yet exhaustion sharpened her resolve. When Karenna's raven arrived, she dragged herself from the Ares' cold feather bed to the rookery, read by torch, and pursed her lips. "Old Town burns again," she whispered. "And Jon Snow plots plague." She could not abide either. Outrage at Yara's cruelty warred with her abhorrence of plague warfare. Asha might have lost half her fleet, but she had not lost honor. She sent ravens to Sunspear, to River Run, to Storm's End, begging a coordinated strike. Dorne from the south, Vale from the east, Riverlands upriver. Pinch the Kraken. Across half a continent, in Sunspear's water gardens, Prince Quentyn Martell read the Vale's plea under lemon tree shade. His counselors hissed, "What gain in leaving deserts to tangle in Reachman vines?" Quentyn saw plenty. Ports reopened for Dornish spiced wine. Tyrell gratitude forged into alliances. A chance to outshine his father's memory. He ordered his sandships north within the hour. That same afternoon, Lady Brienne of Tarth, now sworn master-at-arms of Riverrun, rode to the Twins to marshal barges. Under her command, 300 archers drilled in firing flaming arrows from river skiffs. By moonrise those skiffs slipped downstream, hugging weed-choked banks toward salt pans. The plan was simple. Harry every Kraken garrison along the Trident, set supply barges alight, starve Yara's inland push. What none but a handful knew, however, was that at Moat Cailin a very different drama unfolded. Theon Greyjoy's body, laid in a modest cairn outside the southern gate, had never been claimed by the sea. Winterfell's sceptre had prepared it for burning at Sansa's request, a mercy older than their feud. But the night before the pyre's torching, 3 Ironborn prisoners escaped the dungeon, cut down 2 sentries, and dragged Theon's shrouded corpse into the swamp. By dawn they were gone, vanished into reed labyrinths with their dead prince in tow. When Jon learned of the theft, he grew still as frost. He suspected Yara's hand, yet his spies reported she had been days at sea. The event stank of cult, the drowned men's zeal to return bodies to salt water. Jon ordered pursuit but secretly felt relief. Theon deserved the rights of his faith. Sansa, on the other hand, saw omen again. Anything that laced myth into war-twisted outcomes in unforeseeable ways. Somewhere between Old Town's smoldering alleys and the Neck's frozen trenches, a black-winged raven found Sea Dragon rowing south. The bird landed on the stern rail, cawed 3 times. Yara accepted the scroll, cracked seal, read beneath oilskin. The message came not from Karenna. Yara would have tossed that unread, but from Bormund himself. Riots widespread, casualties heavy, Citadel novices aiding insurgents, feast day uprising. He begged immediate return or permission to burn half the city. Yara glared at waves. Two choices lay before her like twin harpoons. Rush back, quell fire, risk losing the larger game of coasts, or push onward, trusting Bormund's brutality to hold Old Town, while she leveraged the cog's grain against every starving port within a fortnight's sail. She weighed them long in the gray dawn. Then she folded the note, fed it to the waves. She barked for full sail. Sea Dragon heeled under canvas, towing her captured convoy behind. Old Town would have to bleed a little longer. Empires were not forged with clean hands. The convoy reached the Shield Islands after 2 days, hugging archipelago shallows to avoid potential ambush. There Yara discovered her third surprise in as many weeks. The harbor at Greenshield was empty of her garrison. Only charred docks remained, dotted with spear-impaled kraken banners. A crude sigil of a yellow sun over red sands had been painted on the seawall. Dorn Daiti. Yara's eyes narrowed as she read the blood-red scrawl carved beneath. Vengeance for the burning of the arbor. She spat. Dornish sandships were light, their drafts barely a cup, enabling them to slip past blockades over shoals where heavier longships stuck. They could swarm Old Town from the south while Vale Knights closed from east. Bormund would crumble. Fury fizzed in her veins like boiling brine. She pivoted plans yet again, southwest to intercept the Dornish before they reached the Honeywine Delta. The cogs groaned under forced maneuver, their Brevosi prisoners terrified. Every sailor worked double watches. If exhaustion killed them, salt would keep them fresh, she snarled. But sea strategy is chess on a churning board. As Sea Dragon rounded the craggy finger of Horseshoe Cape, thick fog rolled in, swallowing horizon, muting sound. From that cotton silence, arrow-thin silhouettes emerged. A dozen sandships, sails ochre, hulls like the curved bones of dune serpents, bearing down with the wind astern. Their helmsmen rode the fog as if they had bred it. Yara signaled line abreast, readied scorpions. The sandships didn't flinch. They cut across her bows at oblique angle, their ballistae firing clusters of hooked chains tipped with lead weights. Chains snagged Sea Dragon's yard arms, ripping canvas. Another chain spun round the forecastle of Black Kraken, yanking its prow sideways. Dornish archers loosed flaming shafts, but not at hulls, at rigging. Sails blazed, ropes parted. Without propulsion, longships lost steerage in shallows heavy with hidden reefs. The sandships skated away, nimble, kitting like assassins slashing at ankles of a giant. Yara roared commands, but wind died. Sea Dragon drifted onto a reef slip. Hull grated. Pumps raced, but water seeped in. Meanwhile, the Brevosi convoy scattered in panic, 2 cogs grounding, others wallowing uncertainly. Dornish skiffs darted among them, cutting tow lines, seizing helms. Within minutes, fully half the precious grain lay in enemy hands. Yara's countercharge came swift and savage. She mustered boarding parties, rowed longboats across reef-studded shallows, took one sandship by surprise, cleaving deck from aft to forecastle, tossing bodies to sharks. Yet the victory rang hollow. By sundown, the Dornish war-wing had withdrawn, escorting 4 captured cogs south into gathering dusk. Yara counted losses. Black Kraken hold, 2 escorts unrigged, 3 cogs gone, 2 grounded, maybe salvageable. She felt for the first time the gnaw of attrition chewing at her invincibility. Night set like lead. Waves slapped reef-locked timbers, sounding to Yara like a slow applause from invisible judges. She stood on the quarterdeck, the burned rigging crackling overhead, and admitted to herself that the board had turned chaotic. Every corner of Westeros now snapped at her like wolves at a giant crab, none fatal alone but chipping away armor. She faced her crew. "We sail to Old Town," she declared. Protest flickered. "Old Town in flames?" She silenced it with glare. "The city holds our anchor. Without a harbor, we are dogs chasing our own tails. Whatever fire rises there, we extinguish it. Then we beat the Dornish from the south and the Vale from the east, All rivers run back to the sea. All kingdoms run back to us." The speech won snarls of assent, but not the roaring fervor of seasons past. Men had tasted fear now, and fear sapped salt courage. Yara turned away, jaw locked, unwilling to let them see her reckon the same cold calculus. She thought of Theon again. He had warned of wolves' bite. He had also died proving Ironborn could still surprise even themselves with mercy. Was there still room for mercy? Or had the war grown too savage for half measures? She gazed west at a moon that looked like a blunted knife point and chose steel. Mercy could wait for victory's afterglow. Until then, water must crush stone. She issued orders, ground the damaged ships deliberately on a sandbar near Lonely Light, rigged temporary masts from spare yards, rotate crews in 3 watches. The march to Old Town would be slower now, but slowness could cloak cunning. She sent 2 skiffs ahead under false Tyrell colors, bearing letters forged in Sansa's own hand by a Braavosi scribe. An old trick, yes, but confusion was currency. If they reached Terena's rebels first, maybe those rebels could be led into a trap inside their uprising. Carena did not pause to study seals when those letters arrived. She tore them open, scanned the Stark-stamped words promising a joint assault within 5 days. Supplies hidden in port warehouses, code phrases for river infiltration. Her heart raced. Evidence of true northern aid. She summoned her council that night, reading the letter aloud. Cheers broke. Her maesters blessed the 7. They set about finalizing a plan to storm the harbor gate on Dawn Day, exactly 5 dawns hence. Yet one young acolyte, slender, freckled, too earnest for conspiracy, slipped away after the council to find his old mentor, an archmaester kept under light Ironborn watch, because he alone remained neutral. The archmaester read the letters, frowned and whispered, ink still tacky despite days' travel claimed. The seal of Winterfell's ravenry lacks the faint ridge where the Stark direwolf brand is cracked. Forgery. Then, the acolyte's blood chilled. He begged the archmaester to flee. Instead, the elder scholar sent him to Carena with warning. The boy never reached her. Ormond's spies, a half-dozen gutter orphans promised silver, slit his throat in a fish alley. The warning died in blood. While Old Town knotted its own noose, Jon Snow prepared his silent plague fleet. 20 leaky fishing cogs disguised as traders, each crewed by 3 condemned criminals, rapers, thieves, men whose execution warrants already inked. Only 2 would carry real plague. Greywater rot culled from a Feyre's swamp camp. The rest held colored water and rumor. Enough, he reckoned, to blockade by fear. As the fleet assembled in White Harbor's outer roads, Sansa visited. She walked the slippery plank to the flagship, faced the ragged men who would die for her kingdom's hope. She gave each a coin stamped with the direwolf and said, "Your families will have bread. Your names carved in marble here." Some cried. Most simply nodded, resigned. She stayed until anchor raised. The sails caught dawn's pale gold. The cogs drifted east, set to skirt Skagos before turning south. Watching them vanish, Sansa folded arms against the chill and whispered a prayer borrowed from a coastline faith she did not share. What is dead may rise again. For if those men's sacrifice failed, the North too would sink. Brienne's skiff force reached the mouth of the Trident under crescent moon. Gliding past the half-sunk ribs of prior engagements, they unleashed havoc. Fire arrows streaked across black water, planting blossoms of flame on Kraken supply barges moored too close together for safety. Pitch flared, masts toppled, screams fizzed. Ironborn watchtowers on the delta erupted in choral fire, but the skiffs vanished into reed channels. Each night repeated, strike, burn, disappear. Rivers, once Yara's arteries of conquest, clotted with char and wreckage. Word of the assaults reached the neck, raising northern morale like thaw in springtime. Moat Caelan's garrison cheered each report. Archers sang old hunting songs again. Yet, deep in the swamps, the trio of escaped Ironborn hauled Theon's body on a makeshift bier of willow poles, chanting low to ward off swamp spirits. On the 3rd night, under sickly starlight, They waded into a pool where black water reflected constellations like shattered chalices. There they immersed the corpse. One man slit his own palm and whispered a prayer to the drowned god. Bubbles rose. In that moment, according to tales later told, the bog sighed, as if inhaling a new legend. Whether magic stirred or only sorrow touched madness, the ripples expanded and did not stop expanding, reaching watchers unseen, as legends always do. 4 days before the planned harbor gate assault, Yara slipped back into Old Town Harbor under cover of storm cloud. Lightning painted the sky greenish-white, revealing burning husks still smoldering along the wharves. Her heart clenched at the devastation. Yet Borman's flag, a black kraken draped in blood-crimson banner of retribution, still flew above the harbor tower. Relief warred with rage at what his heavy hand had wrought. She ordered Sea Dragon anchored at mid-river, hidden by shadow of the high tower. Under torchlight she took a skiff ashore. The streets stank of soot and corpses. Charred barricades blocked alley mouths. The paving stones beneath her boots crunched with grain, spilled when rebels overran a storehouse. She found Bormund in the customs hall, his beard singed, chest strapped due to arrow wound. He knelt when she appeared, but she hauled him upright by gorget. "You burned half my port," she hissed. "And still rebels hold the inland gates." "Apologies, Queen," he rasped. "But their leader, Tyrell bitch, plans a final assault on Dawn Day. I let word spread that you would confirm surrender terms then. We will gather them in the square, slaughter or chain as you deem." Yara's grip eased. Brutal, yes, but efficient. And she needed efficient now. She dismissed him, turned to inspect Scorpion ammunition. Yet, as she reviewed supply manifests, a captured novice, barely 15, stumbled under guard, shouting about forged Stark letters. Yara's pulse quickened. She ordered the boy to repeat. He did. Sobbing. She had the guard release him, gave him water, pressed. "Which letters?" "When delivered." He described them: Tyrell seal broken, Winterfell seal imperfect. Yara realized with shock that the forgeries had worked too well. Her own trap risked catching her inside it if Karenna attacked expecting support from allies that did not exist. If rebels found themselves betrayed, they might fight to the death rather than accept chains. City could burn whole. She sent runners to recall Bormund, craft new countermeasures, widen fire breaks, douse rooftops, double watch on grain granaries. She would confront Karenna herself at the square. Perhaps a personal pledge of leniency might end siege without further blood. Iron at times cleaves better with honey glazing. But honey was in short supply, and so was time. For that very night Prince Quentin's sand ships, fresh from their victory at Greenshield, slipped through shallows south of the Honeywine mouth. Storm-force tide masked their oars, rain blurred watch lanterns. They beached near the old Lazar pits and poured 300 spearmen onto the mudflats, led by Quentin himself in boiled leather armor, dyed red with desert clay. Their objective was surgical: sabotage the chain tower that controlled harbor defense, then retreat. Without the great chain, Old Town lay open to seaward bombardment by dawn. At the same hour, Vale galleys under Lord Jan Royce rounded the sound of songs, hugging Dinas cliffs to stay beyond sight. They wielded no chains, no firepots, just determination and the wind. In 8 hours, they expected to see the harbor chain sag, unfettered. They would surge in, unload Knights of the Vale to join Karenna's uprising. The pincers closed. Dawn Day dawned, bruised purple beneath roiling cloud. Yara, dressed in oil-black brigandine, left circlet behind, no bright target for crossbowmen. She stationed scorpion nests on rooftops surrounding Ledger's Square, Euron's old sigils removed. Rebel envoys had agreed to parley and bring Tyrell, Lady Karenna. Grain sacks waited stacked in wagons at the square's edge, token of mercy or bait. The crowd trickled in: dockhands, septas, traders, maesters in scorched robes. Yara took position on a dais built from crates, Bormund at her right, 2 scorpion crews at corners. She raised gloved hands for silence. "You fight for bread," she began, voice carrying surprisingly gentle over hush. I brought ships filled with grain, but bread must be grown, milled, shipped, and defended. I defend. Join me, and no child in Old Town starves. Murmurs rolled. Karenna stepped forward, flanked by red wine marines. Her voice rang. Bread shipped for your armies, not for small folk. You tax ports until fishwives sell their nets. You crush vineyards for pitch to burn northern hulls. We say no more. Pause. Yara let it swell, then cut through. Say no, and all seas close. Storm's end will not feed you. Dorn will only thirst you. Damn? DC? Behind Karenna, Maester lifted a horn, preparing to rally. At that exact instant, a thunderous crack shattered air, stone grinding on stone. The harbor chain tower shook. The great iron link sagged, sliding with screech loud enough to jolt birds from eaves. Heads snapped toward the harbor. From distant water came the unmistakable boom of Vale war horns. Yara cursed. Everything happened at once. Rebel shouts surged as Karenna thrust a dagger skyward. Screaming! The chain falls! Free, Old Town! The mob rushed. Borman's scorpions fired, bolts tore into bodies. But the crowd's mass was unstoppable. Human tide smashing dazed ironborn ranks. Yara leapt from dais as spear passed where her chest had been. She hacked a path toward a side alley, mind racing. Vale fleet inbound, chain breached, sandships poised for backdoor strike. A three-front assault. She had gambled wrong. Now only ferocity might pull victory from dust. She signaled retreat to the high tower, highest defensible position, with harbor artillery. She sprinted, boots slipping in blood. Borman limped behind. Rebels poured after them. Stones, knives, bottles whistled through air. Yara's guard dwindled one by one. She reached the tower gate, forced it closed with two sailors' help, dropped iron bar. Outside, fists hammered wood like rain on drum. Up 40 flights she climbed, lungs burning, until they burst onto the beacon platform. Wind howled, stinging with salt. Below, harbor churned with white wakes, Vale galleys streaming inward under blue falcon sails. On the southern horizon, sandship silhouettes sagged sails, ready to turn broadside. Rebels clustered along piers, cheering their saviors. Yara's own fleet, unprepared, lay at anchor like cattle. For the first time, she tasted real defeat. Yet her eyes picked details others missed. The galley's formation tight, but overlapped. One rogue scorpion shot could spark a chain collision. Sandships feather light, easily scattered by downstream wind shift. Rebels massed on piers above powder stores captured from her arsenal. Chaos, if induced, could transform hope into slaughter. She grabbed Bormund. Light wildfire, cache 12. Target mid-harbor. Drop barrels, scatter wind. He stared. It will kill our men. It kills theirs faster. He hesitated a heartbeat, then nodded. Runners dashed. Within minutes, green plumes sprouted among moored longships. Flames sprawled across harbor like demons dancing. One Vale galley struck burning slick, hull blazing. It veered, crashed broadside into neighbor. Masts tangled. Sandship captains, seeing conflagration, reefed sails, lost wind, drifted cross-current into shallows. But green fire does not discriminate. A burst roared against high tower foundation. Stone trembled. Yara braced as shockwave whipped her hair. She saw rebels on piers shriek as a barrel exploded beneath them, wooden pilings vanishing in molten emerald. Arms, flags, flour sacks, bodies hurled skyward and rained char. Cheers turned to screams, triumph to panic. For one dizzy breath, she believed she had reclaimed initiative. Then the world tilted. Beneath her boots, the great tower groaned. Too many shocks, too low. A chunk of parapet sheared away, plunging into harbor. Cries below rose in desperate chorus, and still wildfire spread. Borman stumbled back, face pale. Foundation cracked. If we stay. Yara scanned burning city, flaming harbor, enemy fleets clawing to reorder. She realized victory here, if possible, would cost Old Town complete ruin. And with Old Town gone, so died her central grain depot, her anchor to continent. She, not the rebels, would wear that blame. She closed eyes, felt weight of Theon's final words. The sea can drown itself. Perhaps she had indeed drowned her own dream already. She opened eyes. Signal full withdrawal. We abandon Old Town. Borman gaped. She shoved him toward stairs. Save what ships you can. Get them beyond chain. We regroup at Arbor. He fled. She lingered, staring at maelstrom of her making. Then she too descended, each step filling her with strange calm. Let them think she retreated beaten. She would empty the granaries first, torch them to ash. Famine as parting gift. Then she would rebuild farther south, in the islands that yielded unending coconuts and cane. Kings on land chased crowns. She hunted survival, and tides followed her still. Karenna watched the Kraken banners haul down, unbelieving. Wildfire still raged, but iron-born grapnels slipped chains free, longships rowing madly out to sea. She sobbed, half joy, half horror. Bodies littered every quay, the water glutted with green-lit corpses. But the city was hers again, if she could stop it burning to cinders. She rallied bucket lines, maesters led patience. Vale Knights landed finally, helping douse. Dawn spread across a skyline ragged but free. In River Run, Brienne received Raven of Yara's retreat. She allowed herself single smile before barking for scouts to pursue upcoast. In Sunspear, Prince Quentin cursed having misjudged Wildfire's reach, but celebrated strategic success. Old Town's chain broken, Yara fled. He dispatched runners inland to trade water wagons for allegiance in Reach villages. In Winterfell, Sansa heard and sank into chair. Relief and dread intermingled. A foe in flight might be more dangerous. Jon's plague fleet already sailed. Should she recall them? Debate raged, but few crows could reach ocean cogs now. Fate unreeled on wind and wave. 70 leagues seaward, Yara balanced on Sea Dragon's aft rail, staring back at smoke pillar rising over Old Town. Her fleet numbered half what it once did, sails patchwork. Yet every hull, still afloat, symbolized resilience. The drowned god's lesson. What is drowned may never die, but rise harder. Monarchs tend to measure victory in captured crowns and conquered castles. She measured it in breath, drawn, and storms survive. Fresh storms brewed to west. She tasted ozone. She turned to her captains huddled on deck. We sail for Pike, she announced. Murmurs swelled. Pike was ruinous, but unyielding. We rebuild home fleet, iron forges burn day and night, and we return with tide and hunger at our backs. We took Old Town once. We can shatter Dragonstone next, strangle King's Landing, whatever realm crawls from rubble. And no, a young first mate spoke up. And the Reach grain? Yara's gaze flickered south. Gone. The realm will starve with or without us, but hunger breeds sell sales. We pay them. The mate frowned. With what? Yara's mouth curved. Bravosi coin. And something rarer. Salt rights. Every pirate loves a port. Pike will become a hive. She dismissed them, retreating to cabin. Alone. She touched Theon's iron ring. She whispered, I have not forgotten you. Outside, gulls shrieked chase of a school above waves, sound like mocking laughter. She smiled anyway. The game started anew each dawn. And dawn crested as orange line across black water, promising another chance to redraw every boundary on every map men clung to in vain. Many leagues north, where bog meets forest, a figure clawed from swamp water gasped a breath. Pale eyes fluttered open and a face mottled green by algae, hair tangled with weeds. The body that had been Theon Greyjoy convulsed, spewed brine, and coughed violet-tinged water. From reeds the 3 drowned men knelt, chanting, tears streaking mud-caked cheeks. On the far bank torches glimmered. Wolf banners. Stark outridders. One drowned man turned, raised hands. "Behold, the prince returns." The revived man shivered, memories shattered, but one thing clear. A sister's voice carried on salt wind calling him home. He rose unsteady, dripping swamp, skin cold as moon-kissed iron. Somewhere, the war still raged. Somewhere, hunger still ruled. And somewhere, a Kraken queen retreated to rise again. He walked toward the light, either to save her from herself, or to finish the fate she had begun to sow. The war of tide and frost had not yet written its final stanza. Only one truth remained as sure as winter and wave. Salt endures. Stone cracks. And water remembers even after men forget. K. G. Smoke from Old Town's great pyres still drifted in sour ribbons across the sunset sea when the battered Ironborn fleet swung northward and disappeared beyond the horizon of the Reach. For 3 full days and nights, the storm that had shepherded Yara's withdrawal raged against headwinds, wringing every last ember of color from the sky, until even the boldest among her surviving captains muttered that the drowned god was wringing the rot from their lungs. At dawn on the 4th day, when gray light peeled across the water like a dull blade, the horizon finally revealed Pike, its torn towers clinging to stone stacks, its rope bridges quivering in the wind as though spun from cobwebs. Several captains wept openly at the sight. Others stared in hollow silence, reminded all at once that retreat had become a word they now knew. Their queen had taught them fear by surviving it so publicly. She watched from Sea Dragon's prow with one foot braced on the rail, arm cradling the silver-etched axe she had taken from the Braavosi captain. The weapon's haft still bore flecks of red rust where sea wind had salted blood into its grain. Around her, the deck shivered under each swell, but she held her balance easily, seeming to lean against the rolling horizon instead of the boards. She had not slept since the last wildfire burst beneath the Hightower foundation. Dreams were thieves, and she could not afford thieves so soon after losing her greatest treasury, Old Town's granaries, to a revolt she herself had ignited. A gull screamed overhead, and she raised her eyes to the bird, wondering whether it had been born on Pike's cliffs or carried within it the memory of 100 coasts, each indistinguishable from the others. A sailor nearby crossed himself twice, once for luck, once against the omen, and whispered that gulls were restless spirits of Ironborn who drowned too passionate to sink. Yara quirked a brittle smile. If that were so, Pike's skies would soon darken under a flock so large it would blot the sun. She stepped down the gangplank onto her ancestral rock moments later, boots thudding on the wet timber as the last of her men wrestled ropes around cleats. The air smelled of kelp and iron, and the soft rot that clung perpetually to every crevice of this weather-eaten keep. Long before Old Town, before Bear Island, before the hunger that scoured Westeros, this had been home. It would be again, but first she had to mold it into something more than a crumbling fortress on the edge of the world. A scrawny thrall scuttled up to announce that Lords Dunstan Drum and Torwald Blacktide awaited her in the Sea Tower's dust-choked hall. They had ridden hard, crossing from their own islands, to greet the queen who had seized, and then abandoned half the mainland in a single season. Yara dismissed the thrall with a flick of her hand and climbed instead to the tower walkway overlooking the Black Wind Inlet. From here she could see every ship that had limped with her through the storm, broken masts like splinters protruding skyward, hulls bandaged with tar-soaked canvas, braziers smoldering as carpenters immediately set about replacing ravaged beams. The repair would take all winter. In better days the Isles would have used the lull to plunder the western shores. But those coasts were already picked clean or protected by alliances Yara had not yet broken. Time then to mine deeper quarries. She thought of the Braavosi silver sealed in her stern lockers, spoils enough to bankroll fresh forges and coax sail companies to Pike's docks if she promised them port rights. She also thought of the scattered whispers she'd intercepted from far-off Essos, Taroshi magisters already speculating on a famine corridor stretching from the Neck to the Dornish marches. The more desperate the mainland grew, The more they would pay for salt, dried fish, and the sea lanes she alone could make safe. Yes, let the wolves and roses gnaw each other. Let the Falcon Queen scrap with Dornish princes. All the while she would turn Pike into a warehouse of necessity, the only granary still protected by water. But every blueprint demanded steel and sweat, and for those she needed her island lords to bend knee without question. She turned from the parapet and strode down the spiraling stair, boots clanging each step like a drum, rehearsing in her mind the words she would use when she faced them. Not promises of glory, not rousing calls to drown the world, but the blunt arithmetic of grain, coin, and shipwrights' nails. She entered the hall to find Drummond Blacktide leaning across a scarred oak table, where tide charts and scribbled ledgers scattered like wounded birds. They straightened when they saw her, Drum stiff and formal, Blacktide with a lazy grin somewhere between respect and contempt. Drum spoke first. "The Iron Fleet has never returned so thin, my queen." He eyed the roster pinned to the table. 47 hulls lost outright. 29 crippled. That is a wound, not a scar. Blacktide's grin widened. "And the Reach folk tell tales already. How rebels burned your harbor. How Dornish sunships sent you running." He splayed calloused fingers across the tide chart. "Hard sail crews might think twice before taking coin from a queen whose crown sits on shifting waves." Yara placed her axe carefully on the table, so its edge glinted in the torchlight, and said nothing for a full breath. Then she leaned forward. "I lost ships," she said. "I lost Old Town to fire, not to steel. And in fire I also lost rebels who would have bled our holds dry. But I gained 30,000 stoneweight of Bravosi coin and 15,000 bushels of grain before Quentin Martell's gnats took their nibbles. That grain is already salted in holds, safe beneath my deck. Those coins will buy more oak than the shields could grow in 10 summers. So tell me, Drum, tell me, Blacktide, how large will the Iron Fleet stand by spring, if every forest in the Isles rings with axework for me?" "Now." Blacktide's grin faltered. Drum cleared his throat. Yara went on. "You fret over storms and losses, but you forget the mainland does not eat its dead. They will starve before we do, and by the second 6 moon they will come to us offering raw ore, barley tithes, even their daughters' dowries, simply to sail under our flag for a mouthful of herring. Let them. We will take those deals, stack them coin by coin, and by next winter we will launch hulls plated in black steel and oars, lined 13 benches deep. Then," she pivoted, letting them see the ragged state of her cloak, the bruises on her arms, the exhaustion still drawing shadows beneath her eyes. "I bled for this. I bled so that the Iron Islands would never again chase a single raid, then scuttle home satisfied. I have shown the realm what hunger feels like. Now we feed it just enough to keep it crawling back. That is empire. That is conquest without walls." Drum's shoulders eased. He bobbed a curt nod. "Your vision is large." A pause, then. "It will require every forge on Great Wick, every pine on Harlaw." Yara nodded. "And every boy with arms strong enough to wield an adze. Spread word. Wages triple for any shipwright who finishes a keel before the vernal tide. Salt wives will weave sails till fingers bleed. We bury our dead tomorrow, then we build." Blacktide bowed flamboyantly but said, "I will obey. Yet, even as we build, the tides carry rumors north. They say the Starks craft a plague fleet to frighten ports. They say the Vale Queen bargains with Bravos for new sell sail rows. If half of it is true, they may strangle trade before we draw first timber." "Then?" Yara's lips curled. "Rumor is the cheapest weapon. We will spend coin, not whispers. A sell sail with a full purse cares little for stories." She lifted her axe and slid it across her belt. "Steel ends rumor. Gold buries it." She dismissed them and ascended to her father's old solar, a chamber that still stank faintly of Balon's bitter pipe moss. There she found silence and a draught creeping through cracked shutters. She sank onto a cushioned bench, closed her eyes, and whispered Theon's name. Just once, into the gloom. She did not cry. Tears belonged to a life where she had been only a daughter. That life was ash now. She slept sitting upright, one hand on her axe, and dreamt of hulls stretching across the sunset sea like black-spined leviathans. Across the cold waters of the Bight, and beyond the jagged claws of Skagos, Jon Snow's plague fleet moved like a funeral procession, sails reefed low to advertise misery. The condemned men who crewed the boats coughed convincingly, some from real marsh fever, others from powders the maesters had prepared. 2 galleys, truly sickened by grey-water rot, sailed in the middle of the column, their decks already spattered with bile and blood. Ravens circled the masts, drawn by the scent. Whenever a ship passed too close to a fisher's wherry, the crew hacked violently until the wherry tacked away in terror. Days blurred into icy nights. Each dusk the prisoners lashed themselves to the tillers to keep from collapsing, determined to see the mission through. They had promised families food and coin, and the promise held them upright when their breaths rattled like dry gourds. Off Dragonstone, some minor pirate cutter approached, perhaps thinking the slow cogs easy prey. But when its captain saw the red-flagged masts and heard the hacking chorus, he turned tail, leaving only a single arrow arcing harmlessly into the sea. Near the mouth of Blackwater Bay, the fleet split, half turned east, following currents toward the stepstones to whisper plague into Lysine ears. The flagship and 3 escorts sailed onward toward Old Town, unaware that Yara had already fled. The plan, as Jon conceived it, was simple. Scuttle 2 plague ships at key harbors, let fear do the blockades work. Yet plans shaped on a map seldom survive the first bite of wind, and these sailors did not know that wildfire still floated on Old Town's tides, or that a Vale garrison now controlled its lighthouses. On the 12th dawn, the flagship found itself in a fog so thick crew could not see the deck rail. They rode by sound alone, the current tugging them south. A lookout cried out suddenly, a shape ahead, enormous, silent. Before the oarsmen could pull back, their prow kissed stone. Lanterns lifted. They had struck a toppled bell tower jutting half-submerged, a relic of the wildfire blast that had sundered Old Town days earlier. The impact cracked a plank. Water seeped in. The ship listed. Panic rippled. Men scrambled to plug the leak as chilling realization spread. Any plague-bloated corpse washing into Old Town now might be seen not as warning but as enemy sabotage, and the Vale's new watchers shot first, questioned later. They tried to back water, but currents and fog pinned them. Hours later, when the wind cleared the mist, a beacon flared on the northern bank. Blue flame, the Vale signal for unidentified contagion threat. Crescents of archers arrayed on the quay. The prisoners took one look at the drawn longbows and raised hands in surrender, only then remembering they were marked for death anyway. Under threat of fire arrows, they were forced ashore. Shackled, marched to a makeshift quarantine camp outside the city walls. There a Vale maester named Yorick examined them, discovered the grey-water rot on 2 men, and decreed the entire complement a plague vector. He wrote dispatches to Queen Asha Aaron. 3 riders galloped north while the prisoners shivered behind a burlap palisade, unsure whether they had failed or succeeded. Word reached the Eyrie 2 days later. Asha Aaron read the maester's sealed parchment by the moonlight shafting through her frost-laced window. She understood instantly. It was Jon Snow's hand behind this charade. The North had wagered fear as coin. She closed her eyes, pinched the bridge of her nose. Then she wrote back. Quarantine would be maintained, but the plague ships would not be scuttled here. They would be escorted offshore, burned under controlled guard. She would not allow her reclaimed harbor to become the North Scarecrow. Yet she kept the prisoners alive. For now. They might prove bargaining chips. Sansa Stark received a raven reporting the capture of the flagship and gripped the scroll until wax cracked and fell like red snow. She had known risk. But the knowledge did not dull the bite of frustration, nor the guilt that she had sent condemned men to die. She called a council. Brienne on loan from Riverrun, Mage Mormont, Artos Karstark, and little Sir Willem Serwyn, whose clever scribes tracked grain stocks. Together they debated whether the gambit had failed completely or still served purpose. After all, rumors of a plague fleet now roiled the narrow sea. Braavosi merchants demanded hazard pay. Lysine shipmasters turned back from Gulltown. Trade slowed. Prices rose. Yet they also heard new tidings. Yara Greyjoy entrenched in Pike, raising wages for shipwrights, buying timber in quantities not seen since Balon's rebellion. Brienne scowled. Every tree of the Wolfswood she'll pay for, she muttered, and hungry Northmen will fell them for coin. That was the trap. Siege by purse. Sansa stood at the window, remembering the stories her mother once told of Hoster Tully's alliances. "The river is my castle," he'd said. "It flows around every stone." She spoke now with quiet resolve. "If Yara turns Pike into a hive, we must poison the honey. Trade depends on trust. We break that trust, sell sails scatter." She paced. "No open assault. Shall see it coming. We seed dissent. We turn her new coin to dust." "How?" asked Serwyn, eyes wide. "We counterfeit." A hush greeted the word. She explained, "Use the castle scriptoriums to mint near-perfect Brevosi moons. Flood the sell-sale markets in Tyrosh and Myr with fakes that tarnish on seawater. Let one captain pay wages in false silver. Mutiny will follow. Soon every sailor doubts every coin stamped with Titan's crown. Pike's war chest becomes a liability." Brienne worried her lip. "Counterfeiting Bravos is treason to the Iron Bank. They will come for heads." "Perhaps," Sansa said. "But the Iron Bank's reach ends where the seas are frozen. And if the Iron Islands become uninsurable, the bank will cut them off first, blame them for the counterfeit wave. We shift risk to Yara." Nantor. The plan took shape. Skilled engravers set to work on dyes. Chemists tested alloys that looked bright but corroded with brine. Serwyn arranged secret shipments, South dye. All of it dark, dangerous, and necessary. Sansa felt older with each clandestine step, yet she clung to one truth: better deceit than starvation. On the rills beneath the shaggy pines of the Wolfswood, a ragged figure limped along a hunter's path, guided by 3 shadowy silhouettes in salt-stiff robes. The risen Theon Greyjoy had been half a fortnight on land now, yet his skin still bore the pallor of something that had swum too deep. Words returned slowly, memory slower. But the men who had dragged him from the bog fed him eel stew and recited hymns until language found him again. They told him that the drowned god had spat him back to finish work unresolved. They believed he must anoint his sister a true monarch, or drown her for her failures. They believed the world waited for his choice. He did not know what he believed. Each dawn he listened to frost cracking on pine bark, and wondered whether the sound was applause or condemnation. The Stark Outriders patrolled these woods, but the drowned men guided Theon through secret gullies, across iced brooks, to an abandoned hill fort, where they made a shrine. Driftwood crosses, clamshell altars. There they washed him in salt water warmed over flame, cut his hair short, stitched iron hook sigils onto the sleeves of a new wool tunic. They called him the Lord Reborn. He allowed it because refusal felt meaningless now. One star-choked night, as wind combed the treetops and distant howls of wolves echoed, he sat beside embers and asked quietly, "Why me?" The eldest priest, a gaunt wisp named Morin, smiled through cracked lips. "Because the sea never keeps what it cannot use." Then the man drew a knife and pricked Theon's palm, letting a single bead of dark blood fall into the fire. It hissed, turned flame blue. The priest's eyes danced. "The water remembers. So must you." Dreams that night bloomed like bruises behind Theon's eyelids. Glimpses of Yara hacking through smoke. Jon's blade raised over him. Sansa's voice reading a letter to a dim hall. He woke trembling, driven by conviction that neither wolves nor krakens could survive alone. They would devour each other until carrion crows feasted. The realm needed some third path, a bridge across water no one dared cross. And for reasons he could not fathom, the sea had chosen him to build it. At dawn he told the priests he would go to Pike. Some rejoiced, expecting regicide or coronation. Others warned the Starks would hunt him by then. But he no longer feared wolves. Part of him had grown within their fold. He would journey first to Winterfell, he decided, present himself alive, a living debt repaid for the life he once stole there. Then he would sail to Pike and speak to Yara before her hammers drowned out reason entirely. The priests protested. He silenced them with a voice carrying new depth, salt water still resonant somewhere inside. I was born Greyjoy and raised among Starks. The sea spat me out because both halves are needed. He lifted the driftwood staff they'd given him and set out toward the King's Road, leaving their protesting murmurs behind. Winter deepened. In White Harbor the ice thickened around quay pilings even as counterfeit coins passed from discreet northern captains to sleek Myrish merchants who smiled too broadly at the silver's shine. Within 2 moons, casks of false moons found their way to Tyrosh, to salt pans, even to Lannisport. Sailors spent them on wine and dice, gamblers cursed when coins tarnished. Tempers flared, blades flashed, talk of cursed iron-born treasure spread like mold. The Iron Bank dispatched auditors. They traced shipments to a factor house registered to a Bravosi alias that led, eventually, to a burnt storefront in Gulltown, no further clue. Whisperers pointed toward Pike's sudden wealth, suspicious in its very legitimacy. In Bravos marble halls, thin smiles curved. Perhaps the drowned queen required a reminder that debts once called could not be ducked. By early frosts and a delegation of Iron Bank envoys, flanked by pale-haired Lorathi bodyguards, anchored off Pike's treacherous straits. Yara received them in her father's crumbling throne room, flanked by Drum and Black Tide and the new shipyard master from Harlaw. The lead envoy, a woman whose silken gloves gleamed like wet ink, spoke in careful Valyrian-laced Westerosi. She laid 2 silver moons on the stone table, one genuine, one false, nearly indistinguishable, until seawater poured from a vial corroded the fake to dull gray. "We value commerce, not conquest," she said evenly. "If Pike's coin poisons trust, shipping insurance rates will rise. Loans will vanish. Without loans, timber is dear. Fleets rot." She gave a polite smile. "We ask your cooperation identifying the counterfeiters." Yara turned the coins in her palm, eyes narrowing. She saw the trick, Northmen undermining her through suspicion. "Clever." She shrugged, leaned back. "Ironborn forged steel, not silver. Look to Bravos' own mints before accusing." The envoy's smile did not falter. "We will look everywhere. But policy is blunt. Until resolution, we must levy extra duties on ships under the Kraken banner." "Then?" A murmur rippled through her council. Duties meant costs. Costs meant slower building. Yara tapped the real coin against stone. "I will post a bounty for counterfeiters. My spies are swift." Inside she burned with new fury, but fury required patience now, not wildfire. She would find the source, yes, and repay duplicity tenfold. After the envoys departed, Black Tide voiced what Drum would not. "This stinks of Stark snow." Yara nodded. "Then we melt their winter." She ordered half her remaining fleet south to harry trade entering White Harbor, but only the richest galleons. Small fish must pass so suspicion would land on other pirates, not her. She would bleed them slowly, as frost bleeds fingers. Meanwhile, she secretly sent letter to the Iron Bank offering first boarding rights once her new safe haven Freeport opened on Great Wyke. At modest fee, of course. Carrot for the stick. Weeks later, on the King's Road near the last river ford, a band of Karstark outriders cornered a lone traveler in ragged cloak. They surrounded him. Spears leveled, but hesitated when he pushed back his hood to reveal sea-tangled hair and eyes haunted yet unflinching. He gave his name. Theon of House Greyjoy. Son of Balon, ward once of Winterfell, reborn of the drowned god. The Karstarks whispered. They had seen ghosts enough these past years, but never one that spoke with both shame and steel. They bound his hands in front, respectful, not trusting, and rode hard for Winterfell. Sansa was in the great hall when they marched him in. Jon was away inspecting false coin minting, but returned at dusk, weary and grim. Theon stood unsteady yet proud before them, rope still around his wrists. He met Sansa's gaze first. For a heartbeat the hall fell away, and they stood again in Ramsay's courtyard with winter winds flailing them, each mutilated in spirit. She inhaled, stepped forward, drew a dirk. Gasps rippled, but she only sliced the rope. "You came alive," she said. "I think so," he answered hoarsely. The bogs decided drowning wasn't enough punishment. Jon crossed his arms. "Why return?" "To warn you, and to beg a chance at penance." He told them of Pike's forges, of Yara's vision sharpened by retreat, of the Iron Bank's visit. He spoke of counterfeit rumors and how soon she would strike back. He warned that sell sails lured by gold could pivot once they smelled false silver. And he offered a bargain. He would sail to Pike as envoy, claim to bring proof that the Starks had nothing to do with the coins, forestall her vengeance, if the North would meet him halfway by negotiating grain shipments for peace. Jon's jaw tightened. Peace? After Bear Island? After the Neck? Damn. The unbowed head. "I don't ask forgiveness. Only chance to stop the tide before it drowns us all." He glanced at Sansa. "You gamble with secrets. She gambles with steel. Between you both, small folk starve." His voice cracked. "Let me, just once, be the bridge neither side will burn." The hall buzzed. Some lords shouted no. Others muttered maybe. Sansa raised a hand. Quiet returned. She regarded Theon for a long time, weighing memory against necessity. She saw not the boy who betrayed Winterfell, but the ghost who had leapt from a flaming wall to free her. She nodded slowly. "You will go as envoy, but not alone. I will send Brienne with you. Her oath is steel, and you will carry with you our true coin and a proposal. Winterfell will guarantee Pike honest silver in exchange for shared patrols against southern corsairs." Jon exhaled. "If he fails, then we stand ready," Sansa finished. "But if he succeeds, we buy a season of breathing room." She met Theon's eyes. A season is sometimes enough to change the world. He bowed again, a gesture half Ironborn, half Northern. Then he turned to Brienne, who nodded, rested a hand on Oathkeeper's pommel. Together, they began preparations. A sloop swift enough to outrun Kraken patrols, white sails to declare peace, chests of genuine Braavosi moons, minted long ago in Gulltown vaults. Theon felt weight of hope heavier than the shackles he'd left behind. While Winterfell planned for dialogue, Yara unleashed her new tactic: selective embargo. 4 heavy longships, black sails furled, shadowed the shipping lanes north of Duskendale, and struck only fat galleons flying Braavosi or Pentoshi pennants. Crews were ransomed, holds emptied, captains sent adrift with letters pinned to masts. "Trade with wolves at your peril. Trade with Kraken and prosper." Word spread quick. Merchants hesitated to accept Stark charters. Gulltown's harbor began to clog with idle caravels, their owners bickering over insurance rates that soared daily. Queen Asha Arryn, no stranger to maritime politics, countered by dispatching her own escort fleet. But each escort drained coin from the Vale's already thin treasuries. And so as winter's tale gave way to the first tentative melt, all of Westeros found itself in a strangled lattice of fear and hunger. Markets choked, roads unsafe, seas contested. Only Dorne's arid south remained mostly untouched, and Quentyn Martell exploited that, shipping citrus and wine north at extortionate prices, until one night a section of his palace cellars exploded, wildfire once again. No one claimed responsibility, but a shard of black iron found in the debris pointed a crooked finger west. The Iron Bank, seeing chaos escalate, issued an ultimatum. Any realm blocking repatriation of debts would find no credit. They quietly froze Yara's lines first, hoping pressure would crack the Kraken Queen. But she pivoted, selling preyed galleons to Volantene slavers for gold ingots, crude but effective liquidity. And still, the forgeries multiplied. Taroshi mages tested coins with alchemical vapors, swore some curse lay on them. Small riots erupted in Mire when sailors discovered wages worthless. Every rumor circled back to Ironborn. Yara's invitation to sell sales turned sour. Captains demanded payment only in raw goods. Iron ore, timber, salted fish they could barter elsewhere. Her vision of silver buying allegiance corroded like the coins themselves. In Pike's sea tower, she smashed a clay jug against wall, shard skittering. "Someone poisons me," she hissed to Drum. "Find the source or I'll nail you to the prow." Drum hurried out, beard trembling. Hours later, a horn sounded. A white-sailed sloop bore down on the channel, flying both direwolf and kraken banners side by side. Yara stormed onto the wind-scoured bridge as lookouts shouted confusion. No fleet shadowed the sloop, only 2 masts, no visible arms. Torches lit as dusk settled. The sloop anchored, lowered a boat. 2 figures rowed toward the great stone steps, a woman in blue cloak whose sword glimmered even in torchlight, and a man with hair braided tight, face calm but pallid. Yara descended halfway to meet them, axe in hand. Brienne helped Theon up the slick stone. Rain began to fall, soft but cold, like a benediction or a warning. The siblings faced each other across 3 soaked steps, close enough to smell the sea on each other's breath yet worlds apart. Theon spoke first. "Sister." Yara stared hard, disbelief flickering into something softer, then snapping back to iron. "I buried you in my heart, brother." I crawled out. His voice steady, eyes shining. "Because death saw more use for me alive." A humorless laugh escaped her. "Death gives advice now? And he tells you to walk into my keep bearing wolf banners." She flicked gaze to Brienne. "And you bring a shield maid sworn to our enemies." "Brienne of Tarth," Brienne said, dipping head. "Sheaths speak here, not blades." Yara's jaw set. Theon lifted palm. "We come with coin, true coin, and a proposal." He extended small chest. 2 guards took it to Yara. She opened. Moons inside gleamed untarnished. She selected one, tossed to a salt-crusted deckhand, ordered him to drop it in seawater. Moments passed. The coin remained bright. She grunted. Theon continued, voice carrying beyond rain. "The wolf counterfeit was our doing." A gasp from Brienne, he pressed on. "But not the North's. Mine. I guided them. I thought to cripple cell sales, martial time. Yet it poisons both realms now. Let me mend it." Yara's eyes narrowed. "Confess betrayal. Ask favor? Ask truce." He stepped 1 stair higher. "You want coasts open. Markets eager. The North wants fields safe. Seas not starving them. Shared patrols, shared tariff. Wolves fetch grain where you escort. Your coffers fill with fees. Our people eat." Drum scoffed behind her. Yara silenced him with raised hand. Rain thickened. She studied Theon. Gaunt, scarred. Yet there was calm in him she'd never seen. Neither the manic glee of his youth, nor the haunted twitch of reek. He looked. She realized, like a bridge set firmly between 2 cliffs. "You speak of trust scrawled on water," she said softly. "Trust drowns quickest." "Then toss me in," he replied. "If I sink, you lose nothing. If I rise, you have proof words can float." A long moment. Waves crashed. Finally she lifted axe, pointed to Brienne. "Her sword stays sheathed in my halls. The chest stays aboard until we weigh your words." She turned to Theon. "You will dine with me tonight. Speak plainly. Lie once, you go into the sea." He inclined head. "I am tired of lies." They climbed the steps. Rain ceased. Overhead, storm clouds parted just enough to show a ragged slice of moon. A coin hammered thin but still bright. And far away, in Winterfell's lantern-lit hall, Sansa Stark stood at the map table, moving wooden pieces carved as ships and coins. She paused, sensing some shift in the fabric of possibilities, and whispered to no one, "Hold fast. Theon, hold fast." Mendorsana war. Beyond walls and water, hunger still howled. Coins still tarnished, and wildfire glowed under waves. But for one fragile evening on a windswept rock, two fractured siblings sat at opposite ends of a rough-hewn table and spoke of futures that did not end in salt or snow. Outside, hammers rang on new keels, and above, gulls wheeled on night drafts, perhaps restless spirits, perhaps only birds, but their cries sounded less like mockery now, and more like wary, watchful hope. A-K-O-D. Rain drummed against the stained-glass arrow slits of Pike's sea tower as Theon Greyjoy followed two torch-bearing thralls down a spiraling stair he had last climbed as a boy bragging of his first raid. The steps felt narrower now, or perhaps his shoulders had found a weight he did not carry then. The burden of two worlds and the knowledge that a single misstep would crush more than bones. Behind him, Brienne's armor whispered like a distant surf, her gauntleted hand hovering at the small of his back as if he still needed saving from unseen wolves. Ahead, torchlight skittered over walls slick with salt. The smell, not unpleasant, merely absolute, wrapped him in memory. Balon's pipe smoke, Asha's laughter drifting across a moon-dark courtyard, the night he had stared at the sea and promised to become worthy of it. He had broken that promise 100 times, but the sea, capricious as any god, had given him one more chance to try. They emerged onto a rampart just below the sea tower's topmost parapet. Wind clawed at cloaks and snapped banners overhead. The black kraken of House Greyjoy, sown anew yet tattered already at the edges by resentful gusts. Beyond the fortifications, dark waves mounded like moving mountains, cresting white before crashing into froth against Pike's pillars. The torches went out with a hiss. Asha appeared from the gloom, hair whipping like torn sailcloth, her axe slung across one shoulder. Theon had seen her bloodied, furious, even weeping once, but never still. Tonight she stood anchored as the stone beneath her boots, unreadable. She gestured. Wordlessly the thralls withdrew, and Brienne stepped to a discreet distance, folding broad arms. Theon matched his sister's silence until every breathing thing on the rampart seemed to be counting heartbeats. When the wind lulled, he began in a voice softened by the hiss of rain. If I could give you a victory large enough to fill every hull you lost in silence, every jest in the taverns of the Reach, I would. If I could bring back the men who burned at Old Town, I would stand hand in hand with you beside the Hightower ashes and call them home. But I can't. Menshi. Asha's jaw tightened, the only sign she heard. He went on. What I can offer is knowledge of how Westeros breathes, and how the North plans to smother us both if we fight separately. They will undermine trade till coin turns to iron in every purse. They will whisper plague into every harbor and blame the Kraken banners. I helped craft the first lie because I thought fear better than famine. It has outgrown me. He swallowed, tasting salt. Sansa Stark believes her counterfeit will buy 2 winters. John Wadger's plague stories will buy a 3rd. They forget what the sea remembers. Famine and fear never end where you aim them. They spill. Nah. Asha's eyes glittered like wet basalt. You came to warn me of storms I already chart. The North poisons coin. The Vale seizes harbors. The Iron Bank squeezes tribute. Tell me something I don't know. Theon held her gaze. I know how to stop them. A laugh broke from her, not cruel, simply exhausted. My brother crawls from mud, guided by priests whose heads whistle with seawater, and offers miracle. You speak like a maester. For once I studied, he said evenly. While your shipwrights hammered keels, I listened in the reeds. I know which Vale stands have promised reinforcements they can't afford. I know Dornish smugglers who would rather pay you tolls than Martell tariffs. Most of all, I know how to turn the Iron Bank's doubt into dread until they beg to finance your fleet again. How? By giving them back their own weight in real silver, delivered by Stark wagons under Kraken escort. Publicly, with maesters and Braavosi auditors watching. That single gesture proves you are antidote, not disease. But first you must show you can choose bread over blades. Then? She stared, and slowly the wind itself seemed to retreat from her silence. Bread over blades, she repeated. You asked me to kneel to wolves. No, he said. Not sails with them. A short season, long enough for both coasts to breathe. You set the tariff. They pay. You patrol the lanes. They load the granaries. While they eat, you build. When they forget who kept them alive. That's your decision to remind them or not. Asha folded arms. And you think Winterfell will accept my terms? He nodded. Because Sansa understands reputation as you understand tide charts. She knows starving children birth rebellions. She would rather pay the Kraken once than bury the North twice. Lightning cracked over the water, illuminating the rampart in stark silver. For an instant, Asha's features softened. Something like grief washed across them, as if the flash revealed how much she had lost not to wolves, or roses, or the bank, but to her own relentless hunger for more. She inhaled, exhaled. Jon will never forgive counterfeit, she murmured. Jon still carries the guilt of every life he couldn't save, Theon replied. He will forgive the man who shows him a path that spares new ones. Asha considered, head tilting, hair plastered against cheek. And what of Braavos? They smell forgery on the wind. Their envoys left threats in my hall. Give them a different scent. Smell of profit. Offer them exclusive rights to ensure any cargo under the Kraken Wolf Accords. Higher volume, controlled risk once patrols keep pirates at bay. They will sign. Rain returned then, steadier, muting the world. The rampart lanterns hissed as if the sky sought to extinguish them. Asha looked at the flame nearest her, reached out, lowered glass chimney so a gust blew it dark. Another lantern guttered beside it. Darkness crept, but did not chill. She turned back. If I do this, I appear weak to my own lord. Not if you present it as conquest of coin. You tax every bale they move. They labor for you. Drum and Blackdyed don't care if gold buys ship nails or pays reavers, only that it flows. He stepped closer. Let me sail north again with a letter sealed by your hand. 10 points. Tariff, patrol schedules, restitution for plague ships, mutual hostage exchange. Brienne remains to guarantee my return. I bring back Stark's seal within a fortnight. Bell. She raised chin. You'll be watched every breath. Fail me. No god dredges you up again. I only need one resurrection, he said, allowing a thin smile. Silence fell. Save for rain. After a time she reached to her belt, unhooked a sealed tube of blackened driftglass inlaid with tin. She pressed it into his palm. Write the first draft yourself. I'll scratch out lies. He nodded. Tomorrow, she said, I'll assemble my lords. If they spit on this, we sail at dawn and drown the wolfswood in fire. If they listen, you carry our tide north. She pivoted, strode toward the stair, pausing once. Brother, I tried to mourn you. It never took. Without waiting for reply, she vanished below. Theon stood alone while rain rinsed salt from his hair. In that moment he felt not cleansed but charted, like a coastline newly mapped. Hazards marked, depths measured, still dangerous, but no longer unknown. Hours before sunup, the Sea Tower's council chamber filled with every island lord within 5 days' sail. They arrived bristling, cloaks dripping seawater, some still smelling of tar and pitch. Dunstan Drum, Torwald Blacktide, Sawana Botley, Carl Merlin, Harlan Goodbrother, names steeped in 1,000 raids. They found Yara on the high back chair of salvaged weirwood. Theon at her right, Brienne positioned behind like a silent sentinel. Yara opened the meeting with numbers, not curses. She laid out ship counts, timber quotas, forge capacities, and the Iron Bank's freeze. She painted a bleak tableau. Without immediate influx of legitimate coin, the spring rebuild would stall. The Isles would lose what fear they still commanded. Then she presented Theon's proposal. Murmurs rose like gulls. Lord Merlin scoffed that sharing patrols with wolves was akin to sharing wives with seals. Blacktide barked that tariffs were for soft-main commerce, not Kraken steel. Botley spat onto rushes and swore his longships would rather rot than guard northern grain cogs. Through it all, Yara sat inscrutable, letting their outrage vent until voices tired. When they fell to heavy breathing, she stood. "I have given you glory." She began, voice low, but flint. "I brought Old Town to its knees, broke the arbor, made rooftops from the Mander to the Trident Fear salt spray." She paced the table's edge, eyes spearing faces. "But look what glory costs. Half our fleet on the seabed, iron chain around our purse, sell sails wary of our coin. We need a season to rebuild, keels deeper, masts stronger, bows hard enough to break Dragonstone itself. No season comes free." She stopped beside Drum. "Trade buys iron. Tariffs buy pitch dot. And wolves, hungry wolves, will pay any price for a full granary." She tapped the letter Theon had drafted overnight. "Neat columns of tribute, escort schedules, arbitration by Bravosi auditors. Call it peace if you need a word to hate. I call it harvest." One by one the lords recalculated how many nails a single convoy tariff might buy, how many oaks spared from raiders could season into stronger hulls, how a truce framed as subjugation of northern commerce could satisfy even the proudest reaver. Black Tide, ever the showman, finally shrugged. "One season," he conceded. "Then the leash comes off." Drum grunted assent. Others followed. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. Yara sealed the scroll with blood-black wax, a kraken crushing a sheaf of wheat. Theon and Brienne departed within the hour. Asha stood on the stone ledge above the narrow sea inlet, watching their sloop catch the rising wind. The sails billowed, painting white curves against morning sky. She raised one arm in farewell. Not a wave, precisely, but something close. Behind her, Drum muttered about trusting twice-dead traitors. She ignored him. Instead, she turned inward to list tasks. Dispatch ravens to Bravos offering exclusive insurance. Send fast skiffs to intercept her embargo squadron with new orders not to touch Stark shipments. Command every forge on Great Wick to double horseshoes and anchor chains. The North's roads would need both once trade reopened. She smiled grimly, profit disguised as mercy. Let the maesters call it peace. The sloop made swift progress north, aided by a westerly that flattened the sea. Nights Theon spent on deck with Brienne studying stars. They spoke little. He sensed she weighed every word against vows to Catelyn Stark's memory. Still, respect grew between them. She shared dried fruit. He offered stories of the summer sea gleaned from sailors' yarns. Both pretended not to feel the tremor of history shifting under their keel. On the fifth dusk, Skagus' ice-rimmed peaks loomed on starboard. At dawn of the sixth day, White Harbor's lighthouse glowed amber atop chalk cliffs. War horns sounded as the sloop glided in. Manderley banners snapped, and a throng gathered on the quay. Rumor racing faster than gulls. Greyjoy returned, bearing peace or plague. Davos Seaworth greeted them, still hand to Jon in all but name, weather-creased eyes skeptical yet hopeful. Theon offered the sealed scroll. Davos weighed it, then gestured them up the river road. By sundown they rode through Winterfell's gates. In the great hall torches blazed against lingering winter's gloom. Sansa, in charcoal velvet trimmed with white fur, sat the dais. Jon stood at her right. Lords ringed the perimeter. Mormont, Glover, Karstark, Reed. Maesters unrolled parchment. Theon felt their stares pierce his damp cloak like sleet. He knelt. Brienne did not. She bowed stiffly, then stepped back. Sansa's voice carried across hush. "Rise, Theon of House Greyjoy. Speak." He rose, unsealed the tube, removed 2 parchments. First he handed her the treaty, bearing Yara's seal. Second he laid down a single silver moon, untarnished. Murmurs fluttered. Maester Walken placed coin in water basin. After a minute, it remained bright. A soft exclamation rippled through the hall. Jon read the treaty as Sansa listened. Tariff was steep. Every cargo northward paid a tithe of 7% to Pike. Every Kraken escort earned docking fees. But in exchange, the Isles guaranteed safe passage to every northern flag, pledged to hunt pirates, and vowed reparations for the plague fleet. Most striking, both realms would exchange 2 highborn hostages to ensure compliance. Theon offered himself. Yara would send her ward, a young niece, to Winterfell. The North would reciprocate with Ser Robert Glover's eldest daughter and one of Lady Mormont's fierce nephews to be fostered at Pike. 2 years, renewable, by mutual consent. Jon lifted gaze. Steep price. Theon answered evenly. Water remembers. It can forgive, one tide at a time. Sansa studied him, then the scroll. She saw the hand of her own lessons in commerce woven with Yara's ruthless arithmetic. She also spotted openings, clauses vague enough to renegotiate once granaries filled. She met Jon's eyes. Slowly he inclined head. She addressed the hall. I will deliberate with my council. But first, she turned to Theon. Tell us of Yara's strength. Every ship, every coin. Truth for truth. Damn. Eddie. He did, sparing nothing. Number of functioning longships, state of forges, Iron Bank embargo. He described island lords' grudging acceptance, their fear of counterfeit, their hunger for new timber. He painted Pike as storm-lashed, resurgent yet vulnerable. Some lords smirked. Sansa saw the trap. Underestimate Yara now, and the North would pay later. She raised a hand. We thank you. She gestured to dais bench. Rest. Supper soon. Theon bowed. Withdrew. Brienne followed. Later, in the solar where Ned once pondered letters, Sansa, Jon, and Davos poured mulled wine, spread the treaty. Sansa tapped a clause promising Iron Bank arbitration. Leverage, she murmured. If Braavos approves this, the counterfeit scandal ends at Pike's disclaiming any part. Jon frowned. And our coin forgeries? They vanish, she said. Night swallowing snow. He sighed. It cost lives. It bought time. Davos cleared throat. And this buys more. Take it. Jon nodded grudgingly. We amend a few lines, send our own seal. He looked at Sansa. If peace holds, famine breaks. If not, we arm while children eat. Then. Sansa allowed herself a breath she'd held since Theon arrived. Then we agree. Braavos received 2 messages the same day. The first, an Ironborn offering exclusive underwriting. The second, Winterfell confirming restitution of all forged currency with immediate withdrawal of circulation. The Iron Bank's governors convened in the Hall of the Thousand Thrones. After 3 hours, they issued a decree. Tariffs on Kraken banners suspended pending treaty ratification. Credit lines to Pike reinstated at premium rate. They also dispatched a discreet envoy to Winterfell, carrying ledger tablets and a single phrase carved in Valyrian steel on the blade of a letter opener. Debts paid strengthen all realms. Both sides read the message differently, but both signed. Summer's first day dawned with pale gold over the bight. A procession rode from Winterfell's east gate. Theon escorted by Brienne and a column of Northmen bearing sealed crates, grain samples, coin chests, letters of formal accord. Alongside rode Lady Gwyn Glover and young Edric Mormont, chosen hostages, chins high despite fear. Jon watched until their banners became white motes against rolling green. He felt the realm pivot on choices forged by ghosts. In Pike a corresponding party waited. Asha on the dock, flanked by lords, a niece nervous beside her. Shipwright hammers paused. New-laid keels gleamed with tar. When Theon's sloop appeared on horizon, seabirds rose in a white storm, as if announcing some birth. Trade soon revived. Braavosi caravels escorted by Kraken wolf patrols moved grain south, iron north. Ports still bore scars, but market stalls filled with herring and rye. Maesters recorded fewer fever deaths. Children played in alleys instead of queuing for broth. Yet beneath calm, deeper currents swirled. Quentin Martell chafed at losing tariff leverage, began courting Volantine war elephants to secure his wine routes. Queen Asha Arryn secretly negotiated with Mirish investors to build a shipyard on Gulltown that could outpace Pike. In the Reach, Lady Karenna Tyrell rebuilt Old Town's walls with coin from Bravos, and whispered of raising a new fleet to guard against any Kraken betrayal. And on a lonely hill fort in the Neck, 3 drowned men tended a small flame before driftwood icons, waiting for signs that the prince they'd raised would drown the world in faith one day after all. The second harvest, since the treaty filled granaries to bursting. The North celebrated with a feast. Pike held a salt fair without hostage blood for the first time in memory. Yet on the feast's eve Theon stood at Winterfell's gatehouse when a raven arrived. The Iron Bank demanded increased repayments, citing heightened risk after fresh skirmishes between Dorne and the Vale. He understood instantly. Peace was a ledger, never balanced for long. He rode to Sansa. She read the raven, frowned. Bravo squeezes both sides. Yara will see insult. Theon nodded. Time to renegotiate before Renegade Iron does. They drafted letters, planned a joint embassy, Sansa to accompany him to Pike, Jon to remain northward guarding against other storms. Some lords protested. Diplomacy felt fragile as ice. But after drought of war, the realm had tasted bread, and was not ready to chew iron again. On the voyage west, Sansa stood at the sloop's prow while Theon described the sea in shapes and smells she'd never known. How certain swells smelled of kelp torn from deep trenches. How moonlight traced silver stairways across water. How storms sometimes whispered names if you listened where rigging sang. She listened, and in that listening bridged something even ghosts could not. They reached Pike, as gulls keened, and shipwrights cheerfully hollered from scaffolds, taller than any Theon remembered. Asha met them not on the dock, but atop a newly built timber platform as broad as a market square. Her niece beside her, hostages safe and smiling. She embraced Theon, clasped forearms with Sansa, then clapped hands for wine. Night fell. Torches lined the shoreline like captive constellations. Musicians played salt fiddles. Fishermen roasted eels on wide griddles. Sansa, tasting briny sweetness, laughed softly. The first laughter Theon had heard from her since their flight from Ramsay years ago. Later, as moon climbed, Yara led them along a catwalk above the shipyard. Below, half-finished hulls curved in pale lantern glow. She waved at one. Bigger, sleeker, reinforced with bands of black steel, forged from old chain links melted and mixed with northern iron. I name her Shorebound Truce, she said, because salt remembers promises. Sansa rested a gloved hand on the rail. Then let's remember well. She produced the Iron Bank's letter. Yara read quickly, lips twisting. They starve us of silver again. Unless we starve their fear first, Sansa replied. Offer them joint escrow. North and Isles deposit grain bonds equal to coin. If one breaks treaty, the other claims the bond. Yara's brows rose. Turn our peace into their insurance, Theon added. She smiled slowly. And charge them 10% on handling. Laughter rolled across the catwalk. Sansa inclined head. 5. Yara countered. They shook. Midnight neared. Brienne, posted at a distance, watched seabirds circle. Storm clouds gathered but held their reign, as if sky itself paused to witness. Tomorrow we sign, Yara said. Tonight, we drink. And so they did, not as wolves and krakens or queens and envoys, but as weary children of a war-torn realm carving room for breath between tides. Theon stepped away at one point, staring out where sea met black horizon. He thought of Balin and Ned, of Theon and Reek, of iron and snow. He thought perhaps he was neither drowned nor reborn, but continuously surfacing, each wave a chance to start again. He whispered a thanks to water for keeping him useful just a little longer. Behind him Sansa and Asha argued amiably over whose ale tasted of ship tar, and whose of pine sap. Laughter lifted, mingling with the hush of waves and distant hammering. No longer frantic but rhythmic, building something meant to last. The wind freshened, snapping sails on the half-built truce. Above, clouds parted to reveal a scattering of stars, like bright coins on velvet, uncorroded, glimmering. Theon raised a hand as if to grasp one. He did not need to. Their light already gilded every face on the catwalk, and glinted along the new ship's spine. In that light, It was possible to imagine a horizon not defined by conquest or famine, but by journeys, by vessels that coursed from frost-rimmed north to sun-soaked south bearing grain, or stories, perhaps even peace. Morning would bring fresh currents, new challenges, debts called, alliances tested. But morning was still hours away. For now, on a wind-swept outcrop of stone and myth, salt and snow stood side by side, sharing warmth against the chill, mending history one quiet breath at a time. And somewhere deep beneath the waves, the water listened, remembering.